The Daily Mail is known as a somewhat tabloid publication in the journalism world. As far as I know a lot of people don't consider it high-level journalistic output, even though they themselves would tout themselves as such. But I say that because I wanted to find an article that was going to cover this, not salaciously for the purpose of crudeness or extremity, but because I wanted to find an article that was going to give as many details as possible in a non-glossed over way. So I figured that the rag that is Daily Mail, and let's not get things twisted over here, this is absolutely a fucking schlocky, muckraking, yellow journalistic outlet. But I wanted to use this one because I figured that they would not shy away from some of the more gritty details of what is alleged here. So let's read through some of this. Conor McGregor allegedly pinned down woman, used an arm lock, and raped her during cocaine session at Dublin hotel as MMA star faces court over alleged sexual assault in 2018. McGregor was accused of sexually assaulting a woman at a Dublin hotel in 2018. In 2021, prosecutors declined to prosecute McGregor for the alleged assault. That's an interesting point. As a result, a civil claim for damages was launched in the High Court. So, the timeline looks like 2018, Conor perpetrates this abuse. 2021, the prosecutors decide to not prosecute for whatever reason. Maybe they'll get into that in the article. I would assume it would be because of a lack of evidence. These kinds of things are very tough. We talked about this in the context of the Alex Pereira allegations. These things are very he said, she said. And to that same end, I don't know if she can expect anything to come out of the civil claims that she's launching here, this accuser. But the timeline goes that, 2018 it happened, 2021 it is declined to be prosecuted, 2024, where we are now, new court hearings are opened up, and apparently it's going to the highest court in Ireland. Welcome back, Beeb. We're just getting into this Conor McGregor high court situation. What you also missed is my excoriation of the layout and journalistic standards of the UK's Daily Mail, because if you're looking at what I'm looking at, you can barely tell where the article is in this schlock mess of fucking advertising. This is some of the most atrocious, blatant, disgusting layout abuse I've ever seen in my life. Let's get into it. Irish mixed martial arts fighter Conor McGregor raped a woman in a Dublin hotel, the city's high court has been told. Nikita Lehman is claiming civil damages against Mr. McGregor and another man, alleging she was sexually assaulted in 2018. They're just out there naming this person. I mean, honestly, I might have not read that name if I had known that she was the one that was the potential victim in here. Damn, why are they just... Oh, okay, actually, I just read ahead a little bit here. I guess she doesn't have a right to anonymity based on their laws. That's pretty crazy. Look, if the allegations are true, then good on her for being brave enough to come forward and have her name associated with it, because these situations, as I said in the Alex Pereira video and coverage of that whole fiasco, these are not good for anyone. These allegations are not good in any respect. Whether or not it's terrible for the person who was the victim or the person who is being made to be a victim by having a false allegation levied against them, either way, these are terrible all around. And if more people understood how bad this is from both sides of the equation, I think it would be a lot... I think it would be a better place in general as a human being. from all sides of the potential coin here. Why wait 6 years? Well, what happened, Beeb, was that she actually didn't wait that long. She had presented this information in 2018. Apparently, she did everything right, from what I'm understanding. I mean, we'll get a little bit farther into the article, but this was at the height of Conor's popularity. This is right after the Maymack fight. She went to the police, I believe, and it was tied up in court for a long time, a couple of years, and in 2021, the prosecutors decided not to hear the case. So maybe they'll say why that is. Let's keep going. But the court heard on Tuesday Mr. McGregor's lawyers say Miss such and such, who has no automatic right to anonymity, is attempting extortion. Of course, that is the other side of the coin in these cases. And again, I as much as that is a potential narrative for it to be true, I mean, for that to be true, it's not good. It's just not good. It's like, I wish that more people who would use that kind of tactic would realize what they're doing to their own reputation by if they make false allegations. So that's the first part. The second part is, if it is true, then why? I mean, Conor is just a legitimate rapist walking the streets, and now he's had 3 alleged instances that I can think of off the top of my head. There may be more. So there is no good outcome from this except for Conor not having done it, and that's about as good as you can get. Because if this person has no retribution for her saying something false, then there's no good that can come from that. You just have this person attempting extortion out there on the streets, as the attorneys frame it. Or you have, a legitimate rapist walking the streets. So either way, it creates a terrible situation. The fighter, nicknamed Notorious, was in court to hear Justice Alexander Owens tell the jury it is alleged Miss So-and-so was sexually assaulted by Mr. McGregor. And James Lawrence on December 9th. Who is James Lawrence? I certainly don't think it's the Canadian triathlete. James Lawrence, Ireland. Is he one of the gangster guys that Conor's associated with? Either way, I guess James Lawrence is some sort of associate of Conor's. And it happened on December 9th of that year. And it looks like the fucking page crashed because of all these goddamn ads. That is ridiculous. All right, well, fuck the Daily Mail then, I guess. We'll get it from somewhere else overseas. How about The Guardian? The Guardian's a little bit more of a reputable source in the UK. All right, so let's start from the beginning of the Guardian article now. The Irish mixed martial arts fighter Conor McGregor raped a woman in a Dublin hotel, the city's high court has been told. Such and such is claiming civil damages against McGregor and another man, alleging she was sexually assaulted in 2018. Based on the Daily Mail article, we know that person's name is James Lawrence. But the court heard on Tuesday McGregor's lawyers say that so-and-so, who has no automatic right to anonymity, is attempting extortion. The fighter, nicknamed Notorious, was in court to hear Justice Alexander tell the jury, Justice Alexander Owens tell the jury it is alleged that this person was sexually assaulted by McGregor and James Lawrence on the 9th of December. The judge said it was alleged that the pair had, in effect, raped her. So what does that mean exactly, in effect, raped her? The court was told McGregor collected this person, who is a hairdresser in Dublin, and her friend after a Christmas party on the 8th of December. That would be 2018. So just over a year after the Maymack fight. This is peak Conor McGregor popularity and influence, I would say. John Gordon SC, I guess that's this lady's attorney, said that she and McGregor were known to each other as they were in the same age group, from the same area, and had mutual friends, and had been in contact at various times through social media. So Conor is sliding in the DMs. Of course, his girlfriend slash fiance now, always in the picture, even back then. So Conor has a long and storied history of doing whatever the fuck he wants. So, that in and of itself, somewhat suspect, depending on where your moral compass lies, where your personal feeling is on fidelity in a relationship. But regardless, at the time, she lived in the Dublin suburb of Drimnagh, I think is how you pronounce that, with her partner and 7-year-old daughter. Oh, geez. So this chick had, a partner. I don't know if that's a male or female partner, but I'm assuming it's a male if she has a daughter. Again, might not be, but so she had a significant other and a daughter. So this is not just necessarily some like crazy party girl, although it could be. I'm not saying that necessarily makes her not a party girl, but details are emerging here that, either way, God, that's awful for her and for this family that she has, if this is true. She had been out with friends on the night of the alleged incident. Gordon said McGregor was enormously famous and was considered a hero around Drimnagh. I think that is a very good point to bring up. As I said, this is directly after the Maymac fight, or, just over a year afterwards. So, he's at his absolute highest in the sport at the time. Of course he would be considered a hero. Of course he's mega, ultra famous in the country of Ireland. So, he claimed that his client was no angel. Oh, okay, so perhaps she may be a little bit more of a party girl than originally expected. He claimed that his client was no angel and doesn't pretend to be an angel. On the night, she had been drinking and had taken some cocaine. How much is some? Where's the compass on that one? The court also heard that she suffered from depression and had been on antidepressants. All right, well, that is besides the point. But, unless they're saying that it was a repercussion from the abuse. But either way, that does not play a factor into whether or not she was raped necessarily. So, the plot thickens a little bit here. She's out on the town. She's got a partner and a daughter. She's drinking. She's doing cocaine with Conor McGregor. Of course, we know now that is a very dangerous thing to do no matter who you are. Shit, you can be an Italian DJ and still catch a stray. And when Conor throws a stray, it's not verbal, man. Conor will punch you in the face for no fucking reason. So, she's no angel. Does not pretend to be an angel, but she's out. She's doing all kinds of things with Conor. The court was told that later on in the night, this person and 2 of her friends returned to her salon, where they continued to party. And at some point, she contacted McGregor. Oh, she reached out to him. Even more interesting. He collected her and her friend in his car, and this person understood they were being taken to another party. So this chick is party hopping over here. She's at her salon party, and she was at a Christmas party. She's going out of her way to contact him, and now she is being whisked away with a friend of hers, Conor, and this other gentleman. So 4 people total, it sounds like. Again, I have to be pseudo detective over here the same way that I was in the Alex Pereira situation, because it's all of the details are not fully known, and even the details that we get have to be sort of pieced together based on the reporting that we get. So take it for what it is. But that's what the timeline as of right now. She's out. She's partying. She's at one party. She's partying at her salon. She's going to go to another party. This chick is hopping all over the place. And McGregor sat in the back seat with the 2 women while his driver took them around housing estates and beeped the horn. Why did they do that? It's an odd thing to do. Was it literally like Conor just doing like a little mini parade? Like, hey, I got these 2 chicks. He's like out the sunroof. What the fuck? That's just a weird thing to do. But okay. They later went to the home of Lawrence, who joined them in the car. Okay, so they're not all 4 at that time. So they're having a little joyride around, what was it called? Drimnaw? Drimnaw, that sounds like a location out of Game of Thrones. But they're in the car. Conor's with 2 chicks. They're all getting crazy. They're getting wasted. Conor's driver is driving. They're rolling around, honking at people, I guess is the best way to put it. And then this Lawrence person joins later. The court was told that McGregor had a bag of cocaine, which was shared between them. Then the woman, McGregor, his security team, and others went to a penthouse suite in the Beacon Hotel in Dublin. This is how I remember this. The hotel incident is what I had it in my mind as. Back in the day, back when I was talking about with the YAMMA episode. Because I remember distinctly thinking, whatever happened with the hotel incident. So they go to this hotel. There's cocaine involved. These ladies, Conor's security team, and this Lawrence individual. The court was told that they were all drinking and laughing. So they're having a good time at this point. At one point, McGregor allegedly went into a bathroom and beckoned this lady, to join him. The court was told that McGregor came on to her, but she did not want to have sexual intercourse with him as she was on her period. Okay. So, yeah, Conor on cocaine, no way. Yeah, good point. Imagine my shock. So, Conor calls her into the bathroom. He's trying to initiate some sexual activity with her. She doesn't want to because she is on her period based on what she's saying to the court here. Gordon told the court that she alleged that McGregor pinned her down on the bed and that she was no physical match for him. So they go from the bathroom into the bedroom. He pins her down on the bed and she was unable to get him off, understandably so. She will tell you that she was nervous, that she tried to push him off of her, but she was completely unable to do so, he added. Okay, so, again, the timeline. At this point in the story, they're in the Beacon Hotel. They are partying in this hotel room. I mean, the way that they're making it sound, there was security involved. Was security outside of the room? Or was everyone... This is, when it comes to these situations, again, this is also another reason why this is so fascinating, is because this is very reminiscent of the Alex Pereira allegations. Those allegations also happened in a hotel. Those allegations also had multiple people involved at the time. And in fact, it's almost 1-to-1, at least based on some of the facts here. Aside from the security aspect of it, Alex Pereira had his translator friend. The alleged victim had her friend. In this case, Conor has this Lawrence individual. This accuser has herself and her friend. Hotels, alleged abuse. It's an interesting pattern. I'm not saying that there's any relation, of course, but just something interesting to note. You will see pictures of her hands and wrists, which are black and blue. You will see that her left breast has a bloodied scratch. The scratch is there because she was wearing a watch and had her hands up to protect herself. She was pressed down on, and the watch scarred her breast. So there are, I mean, unlike the Alex Pereira allegations, where the accuser did not go to the authorities, in this case, it seems that she did, because there are pictures of all of this, I would think, unless she took all of these pictures herself. But if there was a criminal allegation made that the court chose not to acknowledge, not to prosecute, based on what the earlier part of the article had said, then perhaps this woman did the right thing. So if there is proof here, she's got scars on her wrists, she's black and blue, she's got a scratch on her breast that's bloodied. This is a little bit more substantial, perhaps, than the Alex Pereira situation. Perhaps. So anyway, that's where we're at this point. Victrola MMA. Girl had surgery because she had a tampon in and it got pushed up in. Oh, now that is an interesting piece of information. Shout out to Victrola MMA. Thank you very much for joining and for imparting that. Perhaps that will be part of the story going forward here. In fact, actually looking down at the bottom of the screen, I do believe that comes up. So let's press on through this article, but thank you for adding that, because that is certainly something that adds a lot of weight to this allegation. And of course, based on what we had just read previously, she's saying that she was on her period, and that's one of the reasons that she did not want to have the intercourse. Do be aware that this is dark subject matter. Mr. McGregor then flips her over and puts her arm up in a lock and draws her wrist up by the neck. She can't breathe, and he does it again. He does what again? Oh, I guess just forced her down. Okay, so he's putting her in a, kind of a cross lock, a self seatbelt situation. Using some of that Conor McGregor wrestling. Lol. Sorry for the joke. Inappropriate. By the third time he does it, she gives up. She can't resist it anymore. In the course of this, he says, "Now you know what it's like to be in the octagon when I went down 3 times. Yikes, that's a weird thing to say. That's just a weird, that's a weird detail. And something that a coked out Conor McGregor might certainly, I wouldn't think that it would be out of the realm of understanding or possibility that he might say something fucking weird like that. But that's just, I don't know, that kind of made my skin crawl a little bit reading that. She was at this point completely terrified. She subjected herself to what was about to happen, which was a violent and vicious assault. It is alleged later that she had sex with Lawrence, but Gordon said she had no recollection of such an event ever happening. So how is she recalling that then? Is maybe her friend is telling her that? Again, there are details in the story that are unknown based on this reporting. Like, where was the friend at all of this happening, as all of this was happening at the time? Like, where was the friend in all of this? I guess she's saying that Conor pinned her down, to the point that she couldn't resist. She is assaulted by him. I guess either she blacks out, they had been partying pretty hard. I guess there's, sense is certainly made if that's the case there, that she had just blacked out and also had intercourse with this Lawrence person. If she doesn't recall it, I don't know how that can be alleged, but again, the details are a little bit hazy here. This person later went home and visited her mother, who called 999. Okay, so yeah, so there you go. I mean, you're asking about why the allegations are just coming out. Well, they weren't. She did the right thing. Her mother did the right thing. She went home. Her mother called the authorities. 999, of course, is the equivalent of 911 in the United States, in Europe. So the police were called. She was taken to the hospital. The court was told that she was shaking and in pain while being transferred to the hospital. So really, this person did everything correct. This could legitimately be a failure of the Irish justice system here. Yikes. Cocaine will not make you black out. You Googled it. Cocaine has made Victrola blackout. Okay. It gets cut with different shit. I mean, there is something to be said with that. I would suspect that Conor probably has access to some pretty decent quality product, but you never know. And plus, I mean, a lot of times, again, from what I have heard, of course, when you're doing that drug, you're often pairing it with copious amounts of alcohol, because cocaine and alcohol are like best friends. And one of the reasons that people do cocaine, aside from its effects, is that it helps you stay up to drink longer. So if you're downing large quantities of hard liquor in addition to cocaine, then basically, from what I understand at least, you eventually just hit a wall. So like, you black out just by your body giving out on you, essentially. Failure of her takedown defense. All right. I guess I kind of opened the door for that one. Let's be respectful here. Because honestly, I mean, really, what we're all joking aside, I mean, I really don't want to be making light of any of this very, very atrocious stuff. But, joking aside, this person, as I had mentioned, her and her mother did the right thing. She was, in theory, at least assaulted. They called 999 immediately. She went to the hospital. This sounds to me like a miscarriage of justice here. At least at the very least, why was this not heard in criminal court to begin with? Because from what we saw in the Daily Mail, bullshit website as it may be, the court declined to hear the original charges, to take the case. So my question is, why? If everything was done correctly, this would appear to be a blatant miscarriage of justice in that regard. I'm not even saying that the allegations are true, but whether they are true or not, it should go to fucking trial. If there is that much evidence, if this woman, that is because this is the criticism that everyone says. Well, why didn't you go to the police? Why are the allegations just coming out now? Why are there not criminal allegations? Well, this is your answer. This person did all of those things, and apparently the court didn't acknowledge it. The court didn't believe it. So my question is, why? That would seem to be very disgusting. Again, we're talking about a lot of dark shit today. This is the same girl that Conor's gangster friends threatened. Probably. I would think so. I think they broke windows on her house and stuff. Yeah, that's what I had mentioned earlier. I'm not 100% sure if this Lawrence individual, was it James Lawrence? I'm not 100% aware if this person is one of his gangster associates, but I had mentioned, and shout out to him because I reference the channel all the time. It's one of my absolute favorites on YouTube. ITP MMA Live did an entire video breakdown of Conor's connections to the gang culture of Ireland. And if they were threatening this person, I'm not surprised in the slightest. Again, you got to also keep in context, this is Conor at his absolute highest of fame, power, and influence. Not that he doesn't already, or not that he doesn't still have those things. But, I mean, between the fact that he is a god in the country of Ireland at the time, connected to the underworld to an extent, at least allegedly, and he now has, based on the Mayweather fight that happened just over a year prior to this, has more money than God. I mean, I would think that this person, look, again, the joking was callous. This person should be elevated as very brave for doing what she did, if this is true. If it's true. Now, of course, you can say the other side of it is that it is still he said, she said. It is potentially a situation where perhaps they were having consensual sex and it just got very rough. That's certainly a possibility. But she is doing the correct things. She's going to the authorities. They're conducting what I would assume is the equivalent of a rape kit, however that plays itself out in that region. I don't know what the protocol is, but she immediately got help. She immediately went to the authorities. She raised these concerns. This is the exact stuff that we were talking about. This is the exact sequence that the Alex Pereira abuse alleger should have done herself. So, or that what the retort is to it anyway. So, my point with all of this is that, this is why victims don't come forward more often, and when they do, they receive such backlash. There is no good that comes out of these situations when there is this level of violence and uncertainty, power dynamics, all of these things. Nothing good ever comes out of it. But at least in this case, this person, in theory, did what you're supposed to do when something like this happens. So it's very unfortunate to see that perhaps she's dealing with gangsters threatening her. Perhaps she's dealing with an entire online culture of Conor McGregor glazers calling her a liar. Perhaps. Just saying. So Gordon said, in the face of this, McGregor will tell you that this was a consensual encounter, right? That's what we were saying. That it was, that is the common. This narrative is as common as it gets. I mean, this is as textbook he said, she said as it gets. But I think that the evidence of the roughness of it, which of course they're going to reference here, is a little bit more so on one side. And it would definitely have taken a little bit of forethought on this chick's account, on her part, to say, okay, not only am I going to have consensual sex with this person, but I'm going to make it rough enough that I get roughed up so that it looks like a rape had occurred. Anyway, in the face of this, Mr. McGregor will tell you that this was a consensual encounter, that they were just having fun and a bit of rough sex. That's his answer. What did I say about common sense? Don't be fooled into leaving it behind in this courtroom. What he is saying is that she gave him a license to carry out what has to have been a brutal assault on her body. The court also heard from Dr. Daniel Keene, who works as a gynecologist as well as a forensic examiner in sexual assault cases. So there you go. Here's your rape kit. He told the court he was working at the emergency department at the Rotunda Hospital in Dublin, where this person was brought by ambulance. Keene said she was very upset and was shaking and crying. He told the court how they had to get a blanket for her to sit on because of the pain she was in. So obviously she was in pain. She's crying. This is all very bad. In his report, he said that this woman had told him that morning that the alleged attacker had her by the neck and that he had stopped her from breathing. So he was choking her as well. He told the court that she had claimed she did not fight him anymore and thought he was going to kill her. I mean, Conor McGregor on a large amount of cocaine paired with alcohol in a hotel room wanting sex does sound like it could be somewhat dangerous. I'm just saying it is potentially dangerous. Conor McGregor, outside of those circumstances, sober, is dangerous. Add all of those factors in, it becomes a completely different story. Keene detailed extensive bruises across this woman's body, including her face, arms, fingers, forearms, knuckles, legs, lower back, and buttocks. Okay, that's a lot of damage for it just to be some run-of-the-mill rough sex. I mean, sounds pretty extensive to me. She also had a 9-centimeter scratch on her breast, as we mentioned earlier there. He also stated that she was worried about a tampon. This is the tampon thing that Victrola had mentioned. She was worried about a tampon she had been wearing on the night. He explained how he had to use forceps to remove the tampon, which had been wedged inside. I would think Look, man, I would think that right there, if there is a smoking gun in all of this, because look, you can allege sexual assault and that okay, let me back up. You can allege that all of the large amount, the various injuries that this woman has as far as her bruising goes across the body. Again, let's go over this list one more time of where this extensive bruising took place. She had bruising on her face. She had bruising on her arms, fingers, forearms, knuckles, legs, lower back, and buttocks. That's all in addition to a scratch that she had on her breast. So let's say that all of that was from some very rough consensual sex. What woman in their right mind goes into a consensual sexual encounter, a consensual sexual encounter with a tampon in and neglects to take it out during sex as rough as this? He told the court that he had carried out hundreds of examinations on women and said that the extent of the bruising on this woman was quite unusual. I mean, brother, look, I don't want to tell the doctor how to do his job, but quite unusual might be a little bit too tame for what you're looking at. You know, I know that the Europeans have a little bit more of a polite society, but with the amount of damage that this woman's body had taken, perhaps you could be a little bit more forceful in your assessment as a doctor, because I would think that that would go a long way. When you see a tampon wedged inside of the woman's body to the point that you have to use a medical instrument to extract it, perhaps that is something that you should consider in what you're telling to the high court. Maybe that should have been expressed a little bit more emphatically during the initial assessment. Hey, Jesus Christ. Okay. The defense claimed in the evidence booklet that this woman had several opportunities to complain to people about how she was being treated, but did not. That's, I mean, part of why, I like, the circumstances are always going to be he said, she said in this situation, unless there are concrete other corroborations. So if she did have the opportunity to extract herself from the situation, then, I mean, that's at least part of it. But no, it's exactly what I said in the Alex Pereira video. No victim of sexual assault is asking for it. So if this person was in a situation that was non-consensual, it doesn't matter if she could have extracted herself from it. Should she have? Probably. But she's in a party. She's thinking everything's okay. You know that Conor is a hair trigger. Things could have changed on the fucking, the you know, turn of a dime or whatever, you know, the drop of a dime. Turned on a dime. Jesus Christ. Didn't get that one right. 2 swings and 2 misses. You know, things could have changed very rapidly is what I'm trying to say. You know, all of a sudden everything's one way. That's I referenced Conor punching the Italian DJ earlier. That's exactly what happened in that situation. Conor is in a club. Everything seems like it's going okay. All of a sudden, he's punching this DJ in the face. This is 10,000 times worse than what happened to that other chick. Yeah, no, most definitely. Most definitely. I mean, the one thing with the other chick is that she did wait so long to make her allegations that, you know, it's hard to get a full read on everything. So, you know, I was pretty respectful about that. This seems to be a much more clear-cut case, though. All right, let's just keep going here. We're getting to the end of this thing. Gordon said his client was being called a gold digger and a fraud, adding brave. But where is the bravery in this? Bravery ultimately sits with my client because she pursued her mission for vindication and compensation to which she is entitled, and for for these defendants to be breezily and cheekily disposed of her, or to breezily and cheekily dispose of her claim is something you will consider in due course. Okay, I mean, yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. There certainly are levels to these allegations, and this is most definitely of a higher caliber. I agree. But yeah, I mean, look, this woman did everything right, it seems like. And for it not to go to she was trying for it to go to a criminal prosecution. The fact that the court refused to hear this seems like a grave miscarriage of justice. Kind of makes you wonder how just the court system is in Ireland, knowing that there are mafia ties in all of this. Just saying. Just putting that out there. Earlier, the jury was sworn in at the High Court and told that they were judges of fact as to what happened and would have to draw a conclusion, and it would be based on their decision. So this is all off of jury decision. The action is expected to last around 2 weeks. So there you go. Wild how little MMA media is talking about any of this. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it is. And that's why I'm talking about it. Because I have had this in the back of my mind, drilling a hole in my brain since this allegation came out. So when I heard this, when it was posted, again, shout out to Chase Parton, keeping me up to date on all of these, elements of MMA culture that otherwise are slipping through the cracks. Had to make sure I got on stream to talk about it. So what do I think about all of this, I guess, in the end? It does seem like something really bad happened here. It does seem like this person tried to get justice. It does seem like justice was not carried out here, and it's very unfortunate that this person is having to go to civil court for this. Power, influence, playing a big factor in this, perhaps. Again, it might be a little bit of a scandalous claim, but I very much call into question, I very much wonder about a court system in Ireland that is not willing to hear the details of a case like this. How is that okay? Seems very odd to me. I hope that the facts come out in this case, is all that I can say at this point. Of course, I was not there. I don't know the reality of the situation. I'm going off of what the reporting is. The reporting does not make it sound very good for Conor. I hope justice is finally served. That's where we'll leave this one for today. The main thing that we are here today to check out is this video by Mixed Mollywoppery. If you have been around the channel for any length of time, you've probably heard me mention Mixed Mollywoppery on stream or in videos before, because Mixed Mollywoppery is one of my absolute favorite YouTube channels, period. I think he is one of the best MMA YouTube channels. He covers these topics with a great deal of insight, great editing, and he's funny, which, of course, as a person who tries to bring a comedic tilt to my stuff, I appreciate very much. So I highly, highly recommend that if you're going to hang out and watch this watch-along breakdown commentary stream that I'm going to do right now, go and subscribe to Mixed Mollywoppery. But this is the exact video I wanted for this subject. I wasn't going to cover the Conor stuff anymore. I had covered it in one stream before the trial had concluded. I thought to myself, how am I going to do any more coverage of it? Of course, I wanted to. It's very big news in the space. But I didn't really have all of the details. Like there wasn't any breakdowns that I felt were comprehensive enough to give me what I wanted in order to break it down in a way that I thought made sense and was actually factual, giving an unbiased take on everything that was happening in this case. I was hoping that there was going to be an open trial, or at least some footage from the actual courtroom, because if they had had video of this, like, you know, sometimes in the United States, especially with civil trials, you'll have the full video of everything available to the public. That's why everybody was doing all that content surrounding Amber Heard and Johnny Depp when their divorce trial was happening. I would have been watching I would have done full streams of all of that. Every minute of that would have been watched on the stream if we had that, but I don't know if that ever came out that way. So I was like, what's true, what's not? I just want the facts, not a whole lot of fluff with it, because I've seen some podcasts breaking it down that have a whole lot of political elements to it and whatnot. I've made a couple of comments about it on the podcast and elsewhere, but this is exactly what I was hoping for when it comes to a breakdown of this topic. It is just a bare bones, unbiased look at it. I've only watched the first couple of seconds almost of it, really, maybe a minute or two, just to see what the presentation was like in it. And when I saw how he was breaking it down in those first minute or 2 minutes, I was like, this is exactly what I wanted to use. So again, shout out to Mixed Molly Whoppery. That is the homie, friend of the channel for sure. And we're going to get into this and break this on down here based on the points that he's presenting. Of course, I myself am not going to be unbiased because I've made my opinions about some of these elements of the case known already. So off of this, I'll give some of my opinions, and we'll just see where we end up. It's his recent behavior that makes him hard to defend. Yeah, I mean, his recent behavior? No, it's his comprehensive set of behavioral circumstances, I think, that makes him hard to defend. However, I think what makes it hard to defend or deny is just that none of us were there. As always, it smacks exactly of how I covered the Alex Pereira allegations, in the sense that we can never know, and it's a bad situation. There's no good outcome from a situation like this. Either you have a victim who was the victim of a horrible crime, who has a little bit more money but cannot undo the trauma of the crime happening to them, or you have a false accuser and a victim in the person being accused. And on the other side of the equation, you either have a person who has committed a horrible crime amongst potentially numerous crimes over the past, or at least poor behavior at the very, very least, or you have an innocent man wrongly accused. So no side comes out unscathed in a situation like this, and that is what makes it so goddamn terrible. That all being said, we cannot know the actual truth of the situation 100% because we weren't there, although there were other people there. So there are witnesses to an extent, and people, I mean, maybe not of the actual crime itself, but people who were present at the time that it was supposedly happening. There's CC video footage from what I understand. We'll get into all of it when it comes time in the video. But, I mean, I would be the first person to defend Conor regardless of anything else. As if he did not do these things, then he should be defended in that regard. Other stuff aside, obviously his wife has made some statements, or whatever she is, fiance. I don't know if they ever finally tied the knot, whatever. The point is that in this case, putting everything else that you know about Conor McGregor to the side, putting anything or everything that you know about the accuser to the side, that's the core of what we're talking about. It's not, none of the surrounding circumstances matter. Because I know that in the beginning of the trial, this is one thing I did hear, is that her defense had said, the accuser I'm talking about, her defense had said, you know, my client is no angel and she doesn't claim to be. And it's like, okay, well, we know Conor's no angel either. So where is the truth in all of that? You've got a lot of circumstances that all coalesce into whatever we ended up with in this trial, because there was no actual criminal proceedings, which is, I think, the biggest miscarriage of justice in the whole thing, that this should have been criminally investigated and it was not. So all of that being said, let's get into it here in a second. Your Honor, his wife was in me DMCL. All right.
I want to run through this case in as matter-of-fact a manner as I can. Some of the subject matter will be of a sensitive nature, but I'll avoid graphic or sensational descriptions. And I want to avoid my own personal biases, so I will avoid speculating or editorializing in this video.
It's exactly why I wanted to cover it the way that I'm doing it here, and why I appreciate, as I said at the beginning of the stream, Mixed Molly Whoppery for doing this. So, I can't shout him out enough. Great dude and great creator.
Just want to focus on the relevant facts, as they were presented in the case. I'll begin by introducing and outlining the relationships between the four relevant parties: Conor McGregor, Nikita Hand, James Lawrence, and Danielle Keeley. Nikita Hand and
So, yeah, I didn't know who Danielle Keeley was at first, and we'll get into it here in a second. But Nikita Hand, I didn't want to name these people necessarily, but they are public records, so it is just going to have to be what it's going to be. In the Alex Pereira allegations, I tried my best to not name the people involved, aside from the fighters, of course, because that is the sport we cover here. But all of the information is out there public at this point, so I guess that is what it is. But yeah, Danielle Keeley, I did not know who that person was at the beginning of all of this, but apparently she's an associate, so we'll learn about that now.
Danielle Keeley were work colleagues, but at different branches of a chain of hair salons. Hand and Keeley had been partying through Saturday night, December 8th, 2018, into Sunday morning, consuming alcohol and drugs. Nikita Hand and Danielle Keeley were not close friends. They worked in different branches and were only together for the Christmas party.
This hair salon, if this is their Christmas party, must be a wild place to work in general if they are all night partying, pulling all-nighters based on their company party at different branches. You know, like that they don't work together, but they are partying so hard together just by nature of how crazy the party is. So these chicks were getting down.
During the party, Han mentioned she was chatting with Conor McGregor on Instagram. On
So
Sunday
she was already
morning,
in the DMs.
McGregor collected Hand and Keeley from the car park outside their hair salon in Goatstown. McGregor then decided to pick up James Lawrence, who had gone home earlier. McGregor told his driver he had two girls, two boisterous ladies, full of energy, and needed to level it out, make it a party.
So I need to, maybe it'll come out in this video, but the James Lawrence person is also someone that I've heard the name a bunch of times because of this. I think that he's just a friend, but is he also one of the Irish mob guys? He might be. I don't want to speculate on that too much if he's not, but I seem to remember that the Lawrence family might be the underworld connected ones. So just putting that out there, if that is the case. I again, that's purely speculation at the moment, but that might be the case. Cocaine is a hell of a drug, Rick James. Yes, indeed. And only going to make life a lot more complicated, as you'll see here in a second.
McGregor and Lawrence had known each other since childhood, but became closer friends as they got older.
Okay.
According to McGregor, Nikita Hand also knew James Lawrence. Conor McGregor and Nikita Hand were from the same area in Dublin and had previously exchanged Instagram messages.
All right, so McGregor and Lawrence, I guess, are childhood friends. I don't know. He could still be one of the underworld connected individuals with that still being the case. But I guess they'd been friends for a long time, closer as they got older here. And Nikita was in the DMs with Conor and also was an acquaintance of Lawrence as well. So I guess it's a little, it's Ireland. I guess it's kind of small communities. Maybe they just all know each other in day-to-day life kind of deal. And Conor, of course, at this point in time, I guess that's a good point to bring up if this video does not, is that this is about a year after the Maymack fight or so, somewhere in that range. So this is Conor at his absolute richest, absolute most influence, most power kind of situation, and they're all coalescing into this party that is going to take place here. You saw on James's Instagram he got cleared and he's still talking trash to Miss Hand. Yeah, the trash talk and the vitriol going both ways is something that we'll talk about a little bit after the video. I had mentioned it a little bit on the podcast, but the political opportunism is the way that I put it on the podcast, and I think it's a pretty apt description of what's going on, is pretty wild. But when it's a direct person involved in the case, of course, that's not the same. That's I'm not trying to conflate those necessarily, but there's a lot of chirping going both ways in a lot of ways, because as I had mentioned a little bit as well, Conor's wife / fiance or whatever D. Devlin is, put out a whole couple of statements of her own that were pretty direct, pretty biting against this accuser, Miss Hand here.
But it doesn't appear they were acquainted beyond that. The group decided to go to the Beacon Hotel, arriving at around 12:30 in the afternoon. They went to the penthouse suite where they continued drinking and playing music. So
wait, okay. So they were partying through the night and got to the hotel at in the middle of the afternoon the next day. Damn, cocaine really is a hell of a drug.
These are the dynamics and relationships behind this spontaneous gathering that would later become the subject of this civil trial. Before I get into both sides and the evidence presented, I want to first briefly outline the trial, the verdict, and the consequences for McGregor. As we all know, Nikita Hand accused McGregor of sexually assaulting her in the penthouse suite that night. She claimed that McGregor would not take no for an answer. He pinned her down on a bed and choked her 3 times. She was left with severe bruising and injuries. McGregor denied the allegations, stating that the encounter was consensual. He described it as athletic and vigorous, but not violent. He claimed Hand fabricated the accusations.
So, with that, I mean, and that's, you know, these are purely factually stated things here, but, yeah, the idea that it is athletic and vigorous, but not non-consensual, I mean, that would theoretically be something that could be the case, right? You know, I mean, again, this is Conor at the height of his, still being active, in addition to money, power, success, all of that kind of stuff. So I would think he was probably in pretty goddamn good shape. And with the amount of fuel in his system, the powdered variety, I would suspect that it would be probably amping up his performance, so to speak.
The civil trial took place in the High Court. It lasted for 2 weeks. The jury consisted of 8 women and 4 men. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found that on the balance of probabilities, McGregor had assaulted Nikita Hand. McGregor was not the only defendant in the case. The jury found that James Lawrence, who was a co-defendant, was not liable for assault.
All right, real quick before this continues on, 8 women and 4 men, do they choose juries the same way in Ireland that they choose them in the United States? Like, is it a process where each side gets to eliminate potential jurors and interview them and all that kind of stuff? That's a good question. 8 women and 4 men doesn't matter. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting at with that. You know, it might have been a little bit better if it had been completely balanced down the middle. But that being said, I mean, look, if it is similar to the way that it works in the United States, or should in a just legal system, I would say, then the presentation of the facts should exclude bias based on gender. You would hope. Now, of course, that doesn't always manifest itself in reality, but that should be theoretically how it is presented. I'm just curious if they have the same system where you go through the pretrial process where each side gets to interview these potential jurors. They ask a lot of questions, you know, questions like, have you ever encountered assault of that type? Do you know anybody who has? Is that something that would cloud your judgment? What do you think about Conor McGregor as an athlete? Do you have any opinion about him? Do you watch MMA? Like, those kinds of questions are very important to something like this. And I'm not sure if they have that same portion of the trial process that we have in the United States here. I don't know how other legal systems operate in that regard. Maybe I can look into that a little bit after this as well. You're guessing it's the same as us. You get a letter and do one interview. Okay, so that's a little bit different then. I mean, when you're saying that you do one interview, is it just like, how does, like, what is the interview process like? Is it like you go before each side and do it, or like who does the interviewing? Because here, it's like a pre-trial, not proceedings, I guess is the best way to say it. Like, it's not a trial, but it's the pre-trial proceedings that you go before the court. Basically, the judge is involved as well. And the interview process is kind of somewhat rigorous, I would say. I mean, each side gets I think a set number of questions that they get to ask, that they both get okayed. Like each side gets to present the questions to the other. It's with the court and the law. Okay, so maybe it is kind of similar then. Maybe it is kind of similar. So if that's the case, then, I mean, look, like, if they did full-on pretrial proceedings and vetted these jurors, then obviously his defense thought that the jurors that were selected were unbiased enough, or they were just the ones that they ended up with. I mean, there's only so many ways that you can navigate that, I suppose. I gotta believe that they did their due diligence. Of course, Conor has the best legal team that he could possibly afford. So, I mean, the infinite amount of money that he has at his disposal to make sure that he had the best legal team possible was most definitely in effect for this. I gotta believe that these were the best jurors that they could hope for.
The jury awarded Nikita Hand approximately €250,000 in damages. In the aftermath, Conor expressed disappointment that the jury did not hear all the evidence, reviewed by the Director of Public Prosecutions. So the DPP, the Irish prosecutors, had decided not to proceed with a criminal case, and in the aftermath of the civil case, McGregor lamented the fact that the jury hadn't seen the same evidence as the DPP.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. Why did they not? Maybe he'll say that here in a second, but like, that is completely ridiculous. If the DPP here had evidence that, I mean, either way, it doesn't matter what the evidence does or does not do. Like, if there is evidence that is pertinent to this case and was not shown to this jury, then that's absolutely atrocious. Why was it not? That's horrible. So he should be disappointed about that. Yeah, what's DDP doing here? Yeah, exactly. Random Drika sighting.
After the verdict, Nikita Hand urged other victims to speak out. The financial and professional impact on McGregor. As part of the fallout, McGregor lost multiple sponsors, including Proper 12. The company that owns the brand announced they would no longer use McGregor's name or likeness in marketing. IO Interactive, the video game developer, ceased its collaboration with McGregor and began removing his content from the Hitman franchise.
Yeah, so IO Interactive is they're the developers of the game Hitman that Conor was randomly added to as a boss or a playable character or something like that. They took that back. And of course, Proper 12, you're probably familiar with Proper 12 at this point, the whiskey brand that McGregor started and had a very contentious lawsuit in and of itself with Artem Lobov over. Artem Lobov apparently suggested that McGregor start the brand, and then he did, and then they became not friends anymore, and then they started getting litigious over it. So that's that.
Irish retailers. Several major Irish retail chains removed McGregor's Proper 12 and Forged Irish Stout from their shelves.
Yeah, one of those being one of the largest grocery store chains in Ireland. I think I remember hearing that. So all of those facts are as such.
Beyond the €250,000 and the lost sponsors, the financial implications for McGregor could be far greater. McGregor's personal brand has been severely tarnished, potentially affecting future sponsorships and business opportunities.
So, okay, with that, I would say I don't know about that. Now, okay, let me clarify. Potential future sponsorships, perhaps there's potentially some issues there. But as far as his personal brand being tarnished, I as a person who takes these kind of matters pretty, seriously and wants the truth to be out there and would be absolutely condemning the hell out of him, based on the criminal conviction and based on something that was more tangible here, I would say that there is enough doubt in this case that his personal brand probably won't suffer, aside from things like sponsorships, for too long. I would think. If he wants to get back into the cage, I guarantee you that the UFC will have him back. There's nothing that's going to stop that. So he will absolutely be able to fight again if he wants to do that. There might be some issues maybe in Ireland more so than internationally. I don't think that the international fan base is really... I just don't think that they think that this is the type of thing that they're going to stop being fans for. Like, if you're a hardcore McGregor fan, I don't think that all of a sudden it's like, man, I used to be the biggest fan of Conor, even through all the other stuff, but this is where I draw the line. I just don't see it. I also think, and this, you kind of can take it however you think it's, true or not true, but I believe that there is a little bit of callousness when it comes to a certain population of the MMA fan base that, regardless of the truth of the case, would still be okay with McGregor. I just don't think that they take these kinds of accusations very seriously. I think that the landscape regarding these types of accusations has made it somewhat of a murky territory to navigate. So because of that, you end up with people who say, never believe these types of allegations because all of these women are just out there for cash. All of these women are just looking for a payday. And then, of course, the far other side of the spectrum would say, believe all victims, believe all accusers. Everybody who's making this type of accusation is saying it because it actually happened. Every one of these people who they're accusing is 100% in the wrong, regardless of anything else. If they're making the accusation, then the accusation is true. So that's pretty much the dichotomy, but I believe that more when it comes to the MMA space, you're going to see the former of the two of those. You're going to see people who are going to say, these women are all looking for money, they're all looking for paydays, they're gold diggers, they're cash grabbing. And even if they don't necessarily come out and say it in those terms, I would believe that a lot of those people who have inclinations towards that type of thinking would be like, so what? So what that this happened? I'll watch the next time he fights. Conor merch might get, a bump in sales, that kind of thing. So I say all of that to say, will his personal brand be tarnished in the long run? To a minor extent with the opportunities as far as business ventures go and sponsorships and the things like that. But I don't think within the MMA landscape that it's going to be a complete wash for him. Like, I don't think that this really does as much damage as some people might be thinking at the moment anyway.
His acting career is very likely to be at least halted.
Yeah, I mean, look, he was in the Roadhouse movie, and maybe he was going to get more parts off of that. I guess that's probably a good point to bring up in this whole thing when talking about future opportunities and sponsorships and stuff like that. Yeah, Hollywood's definitely not going to fuck with him. That's, kiss Hollywood goodbye. But there is a lot of, like, independent film going on now. Like, there are studios and producers with a lot of money that operate outside the Hollywood system. Like, I could certainly see McGregor acting in some, like, action movie out of Russia or something. I don't know. Something like that. Call up Chael's agent. Call up Michael Bisping's agent. See if he'll take him on. Maybe he can sort this whole thing out.
I don't think anyone could give an approximate dollar estimate of the full financial implications for Conor, but it's safe to say they are likely to be very substantial. It's also worth mentioning.
That's so okay. So he's saying that it's going to be very substantial. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical of that. Like, and trust me, if that turns out to be the case, it's not like it would be super surprising. Obviously, these are very serious allegations, and it makes sense if they are taken as such by potential business outlets and partners and stuff like that. But there's a part of me that just doesn't buy that. I think that there are companies out there that would be willing to forego all of this. Certainly, if we'll talk about the political ramifications of all of this a little bit later, but look, all I know is that in this country, when one side of the political aisle has an opinion about something, the other side of the aisle will automatically just knee-jerk reaction, like contrary to that. So, like, for instance, and this is certainly not a one-to-one comparison, and this may not be the best example, but it's one that does make sense. When Kevin Spacey had his whole set of allegations and all that kind of stuff, he was canceled. Hollywood shunned him. Can't get an acting role. He's moving house. His whole life is upended, blah, 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 right? Just recently, I saw he was on one of Tucker Carlson's shows. So because Hollywood is the political left in the United States, Tucker Carlson is the political right, Hollywood shuns Kevin Spacey, Tucker Carlson comes in to swoop him up. So I would suspect that there is probably a good amount of potential supporters of him just based off of the fact that there is a large contingency of people who are going to shun him. That would be my gut feeling about it. This morning he was ordered to pay $1 million for her civil defense. Oh yeah, because over by you guys, they have to pay for all the legal fees too, right? That's pretty crazy.
It's also worth mentioning that the case follows other allegations made against McGregor in recent years. Allegations he has consistently denied. Despite losing the case, McGregor maintains his innocence and plans to appeal the decision. So that's a brief overview of the whole case. Probably the most important and consequential question we could ask is, why did the DPP not pursue a criminal case against McGregor?
Thank you, Mixed Mollywoppery. Thank you for hopefully having some answers to this question, because this, to me, is the $1 million question right here. Why was this not criminally pursued in the first place? If these allegations are substantial in any shred of evidence, or if there's any backing to this, even if it's found to be completely 100% false, if she is alleging these types of things, this should have been criminally looked into. Should not have gone to a civil trial and have him raked over the coals in a civil case, because this is a criminal act and it should be treated as such. And then he can be exonerated or, found guilty based on the merits of that, not in the court of public opinion, which is basically what the civil case has become. So let's see what Mollywoppery has to say about this.
Why are we discussing a civil case and not a criminal case?
Exactly.
The DPP decided not to pursue criminal charges for several reasons. Insufficient evidence. The DPP concluded there was no reasonable prospect of conviction for either man, and this suggests they believe the available evidence was not strong enough to secure conviction.
Now, okay, I just want to pause real quick here again. If that's the case, now I don't know if this is the same thing in Ireland, but if the legal system operates similarly, you can bring a civil case against anyone for any reason. That's like if you can file a lawsuit for any reason that you want. I could sue Chase right now. I could sue anybody in the chat right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could sue me if you wanted to for any reason. You can bring legal proceedings against anyone for any reason. If there was not evidence enough to look into this in a criminal manner, this can still be brought as a civil trial. So that part checks out. But if it was insufficient evidence in the criminal case, then why was that evidence not able to be brought into the civil trial? I guess that was what McGregor was complaining about. And was there a reason the trial wasn't filmed? That I don't know. I think that it might just be the way that they operate in the country, because I brought up the Heard and Depp case as well. So, I don't know why it was not open to the public, but if it was, I could not find it because I had looked.
And a reasonable doubt, which is the standard required in criminal cases. CCTV footage. The surveillance video from the hotel played a significant role in the DPP's decision. Now, I'll discuss this at length later in the video, but this footage appeared to contradict or challenge aspects of Nikita's account, and it appears to support the account given by the co-defendant James Lawrence. Credibility concerns. Nikita Hand admitted to lying to her boyfriend about her whereabouts and company on the day of the alleged incident. This admission could have raised questions about her overall credibility.
I don't think it should have. Her lying to her boyfriend had nothing to do with the inciting incident. So, like, I think that he's speculating that that's played a part, but that shouldn't have had any bearing on anything.
Impaired recollection. Hand acknowledged being heavily intoxicated and having used cocaine, which resulted in memory gaps about certain events. This impaired state could have made it challenging to establish a clear sequence of events. In cases of alleged sexual assault that occur behind closed doors, it can be difficult to find sufficient corroborating evidence for a conviction. You know, he said, she said cases are notoriously difficult for prosecutors to win.
Exactly. And that is why, right there, whenever you hear me talk about these kinds of things, whether it be with Conor or with Alex Pereira or with anybody else, that is always the framework that I operate from, knowing that that is as it is. You can't make a solid, you can't draw a solid conclusion one way or another. It's hard to defend or condemn anyone on either side of these kinds of things because I was not there. I did not see this with my own two eyes. There is no actual filming of the incident itself, to our knowledge. So how can you really say one way or another? So I understand the difficulty that the court system would have in making a criminal assessment here. But that being said, I would also think that that same standard should be set in the civil trial. And why would there be a ruling one way or another? Because of that element of it. That element of it alone makes the whole thing too hard to figure out. So I don't know. I guess the jury of 8 women and 4 men felt otherwise.
So the DPP's role here was not to establish innocence or guilt. It was to assess whether there was a reasonable prospect of conviction based on the available evidence. And they felt that there was not a reasonable prospect of conviction for the above reasons. Okay, so now I would like to get into the specifics of the case. I'll begin by looking at what was the major evidence presented against Conor McGregor. Well, there was medical evidence and the testimony of multiple experts. Dr. Daniel Kane, a gynecologist from the Sexual Assault Treatment Unit, provided crucial medical evidence in Nikita Hand's case against Conor McGregor.
So we're going to go into this here in a second. I just wanted to mention that this Dr. Daniel Kane was someone that came up in the previous stream that I did on this subject. And some of this evidence is a little bit graphic, so just be aware of that. But it certainly plays a large part in all of the dynamics of this case.
Here's the key points. He examined Hand on December 10th, 2018, the day after the alleged incident. Hand appeared visibly distressed during the examination, exhibiting shaking and crying. He had to remove a tampon with forceps. Hand had a possible internal tear in her vagina. He observed a multiplicity of injuries on Hand's body, including bruising on all 4 limbs.
Right. So that's essentially the more graphic elements of the examination. So all of that is pretty bad, but does it equal up to actual assault, or was it Conor just, as he described it, going at it vigorously? Tampon gets left in. You know, she doesn't acknowledge it in the moment. Keeps going. I don't know. The tampon thing was a pretty grim portion of the whole thing there. The bruising, I mean, I don't know how I don't know the level or extent of the sexual encounters that most people have, but it's not entirely uncommon for bruising to occur. Some people bruise very easily. I know myself, I do. I walk into bump my arm on something, I'll end up with a bruise the next day. So, bruising, maybe, maybe not. Internal tearing, that's a little bit more damning, I would say. So you have an interesting set of dynamics here as far as what this doctor is encountering.
Dr. Kane classified Han's injuries as moderate to severe. He concluded that Han's condition was consistent with the outline of events she had described. Dr. Kane's testimony provided significant medical support for Han's allegations. Dr. Emma Quinn.
Yeah, I don't see any reason based on this that Dr. Kane's analysis should be questioned, really. I mean, as a medical professional, I think that he probably assessed what he saw and made his conclusion based on that without any necessary prejudice. I would suspect, at least. But perhaps there's an element there. I don't know. I don't think that there's really anything to dive too deep into on that portion of it. But I'm saying that to say there are a lot of touch points when it comes to establishing credibility. So that's another touch point.
Dr. Emma Quinn, a general practitioner, also provided significant medical testimony. She examined Nikita on December 19th, 10 days after the alleged incident. Dr. Quinn observed tenderness on the left side of Miss Han's neck. She stated that the symptoms were consistent with internal bruising. Dr. Quinn noted that these findings aligned with Miss Han's account of being forcibly restrained around the neck during an assault. So 2 doctors are saying they found her injuries consistent with her story. A paramedic also testified that Han's bruising was the worst she had seen in a long time.
All right, so there you go. Going back to the bruising, I mean, if it was extremely significant bruising, then, you know, perhaps that lends some credibility there. I'm saying all of that just to say, I mean, this is a mixed martial artist we're talking about here, a professional athlete, an athlete, period. I would think that the intensity of the encounter, also based on the drugs being involved, might have been more intense than, you know, more heightened than regular civilians. So it could certainly appear that way, even if it was not that way. So all of these medical professionals could be giving accurate assessments of what they saw, with it still not being what they're interpreting it as. Just putting that out there as a potential element here.
There was also psychological evidence. Dr. Ann Leader, a psychiatrist with 46 years of experience dealing with 5,000 sexual assault cases, diagnosed Han with severe PTSD in December 2020. Dr. Leader's diagnosis was based on reading Han's 150-page statement to the police, notes from Han's counseling sessions during 2019 and 2020, Han's medical records, and a personal examination of Han. Dr. Leader noted that Han experienced constant nightmares, panic attacks, detachment from friends, and anxiety about photos of her bruised body potentially circulating online. Additionally, Dr. Frank Clark, Han's GP of over 20 years, stated that Han suffered serious physical and psychological injury and has significant ongoing distressing symptoms due to PTSD. So, 2 doctors confirmed that her physical injuries were consistent with her story, and 2 more doctors confirmed that she was suffering from PTSD.
That's a lot. That is certainly a lot. I think that the psychological aspects of a case like this are certainly things to take into consideration. There is a school of thought that would say that could be manipulated. I'm not saying that that is the case here. I would think that if her doctor of 20 years was quote unquote siding with her, that, you know, there may be some kernel of something there. But if the other doctor was someone who was either assigned to her after this case or, you know, or during this proceeding or whatever, you know, if it was someone who came into her purview independent of knowing her beforehand and made that assessment, unless she's a really, really good actress, I would say that that's a whole lot of medical support to her claims. Could it all be misinterpreted? Perhaps.
DNA obtained from Hand and her underwear and clothes belonged to McGregor. Now,
Well, that, I mean, we know that he was involved. I mean, like, he doesn't deny that, so that doesn't surprise me at all.
DNA evidence isn't that important because
Right.
Conor doesn't dispute that they had relations.
Yeah, exactly.
Physical evidence. The straps of Hand's black jumpsuit were ripped. A forensic scientist suggested that this damage was caused by pulling, not normal wear and tear. A recorded conversation between Hand and her boyfriend later that same day. Now, this was introduced by McGregor's defense, but it was seen by many as potentially helpful to Hand's case.
Oh,
It
that's
demonstrated her extreme intoxication, her genuine state of distress, and she referenced complaints she has continued to make, such as being choked.
Okay, so I mean, the straps being ripped, I don't really think plays too much of a part in anything. That recording is pretty interesting. I wonder if that was made public. Probably not, I would suspect, but certainly an element as well. He's saying there, I guess, that there's a lot of people or whoever is analyzing this said that it was introduced by him and could have been more beneficial to her. Obviously, if she won the case, then perhaps it was more beneficial to her.
Nikita Hand's own testimony. Hand provided detailed testimony about the alleged assault, including claims that McGregor choked her 3 times, and things McGregor had reportedly said during the incident. Now, some of these things don't quite add up. She claimed McGregor mentioned he had been submitted 3 times in the octagon, which, as we know, is not true. But that was her testimony.
So, okay, I wanted to add here, and I'll actually just read it out real quick, because when I posted that I was doing this live stream, Mixed Molly Whoppery was kind enough to respond here, and he did say that that statement in the video was inaccurate. He says the one error in the video is that Conor has been choked 3 times in his career. So just wanted to, for the sake of transparency, mention that here, that that was an inaccurate statement in this video, but the facts of it being brought up in the trial and whatnot are as such.
There's also a separate issue. Nikita Hand was the victim of a very serious home invasion in June 2024. But the jury were instructed not to consider this as part of the case.
Yeah, that's pretty bad, just in general. And obviously, that was not random. I mean, it would take a very large leap in logic to think that she was just a random victim of a serious home invasion when all of this was happening. It has been pretty well documented that she is getting a lot of negative attention and harassment based on this case. So that's a little bit odd to me that the jury would be instructed not to take that into consideration. I think that would have been more beneficial to her than to him, of course. But again, the facts are the facts. And if you have that type of scare tactic being leveled against her, I would think that it would be pertinent to have on record in the case. I don't know.
So, to summarize, there were quite a few things presented to the jury, but the four major things appeared to be the physical evidence, her injuries, and the testimony of medical experts, her psychological state, her continuing PTSD, and the testimony of medical experts with respect to that, her own testimony of the assault, the recorded conversation with her boyfriend. Okay, so now let's take a look at the other side of things. What are the major points that were presented in Conor's defense? A major part of his defense was the CCTV footage. The defense lawyers for Conor McGregor and James Lawrence used the footage to argue that Nikita Hand was not in distress and appeared to be functioning normally.
I really wish that CCTV footage was available publicly. Not because I really want to dig too much deeper into this than I'm already digging into it, but just to know the exact nature of that, because from what they're saying, and he'll say it here in a second, if she's hanging on him or whatever, I'd like to be able to see the actual body language, but let's hear how it's described here.
Footage showed Hand being affectionate towards both men, including kissing McGregor's arm after the alleged assault, and later having her arms around Lawrence and kissing him at several points.
Right. So there you go. I mean, that's basically what I was alluding to. And I mean, it would be helpful to be able to actually see that to interpret it a little bit better. But I would think that would be definitely a major point in his defense. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it's certainly, I guess that there's the two ways to look at that are either she's playing along because she's scared and wants to get out of there and doesn't want to be hurt any further, or she was having a good time and continuing to have a good time. I don't know if there's another way to look at it, but those would be the two that I would think come to mind.
There was a lot of CCTV footage. McGregor left the hotel with Danielle at about 6:15 in the evening. Lawrence and Nikita stayed. For some reason, it took them about an hour to get back into the suite, and they were visible to the security cameras for a lot of that hour. So there's a lot of footage of Hand and Lawrence. The defense claimed that Hand's behavior in the footage contradicted her account of being brutally assaulted and battered. She stated that she had no memory of the events depicted in the footage and found it very disturbing to watch. The CCTV footage also contradicted various other parts of her story.
I mean, it is somewhat convenient to not have memories of these things. Just in general, you paint yourself as an unreliable narrator when you can remember certain things and not other things. Of course, that is not completely out of the question to be true, but I mean, even if you can't remember them happening, like in the moment, just naturally, I would think that you would be exhibiting signs one way or another of how you actually felt at that time, especially if you're in a blacked out state or something like that, disassociating or whatever. I would think that your natural instinct would be to express what you're truly feeling more so than having the wherewithal to cover it up. So even if she couldn't remember it after the fact, in the CCTV footage, I would think that she would be expressing either I want to get out of here really, really badly, or I'm having a good time. Again, that's just my assessment of it. Perhaps I'm completely off base.
Phone records. There were also various phone records that seemed to contradict her story. Hand sent a text message to her then boyfriend from the hotel car park at around 6:28. The message indicated she was having a good time and was okay, saying, "I'm so drunk."
That's also pretty goddamn damning. Even if she doesn't remember that either, but I mean, why would that have been the case? Again, I'm trying to be objective here, but it's like if you're on video having a good time, you're texting your boyfriend, you're having a good time. I would suspect that if you were in distress, you would be doing everything within your power to remove yourself from the situation. That's very similar to the criticisms that I had in the Alex Pereira allegations. You can go back and watch in the video I made about that. But people who are in a heightened situation where they feel highly distressed generally want to remove themselves from that situation at all costs. So if that's how you're conducting yourself and this is how you're texting your boyfriend, I think that that's a pretty strong piece of evidence for the defense.
During her testimony, Hand had initially claimed she sent this message from the hotel room after waking up next to McGregor following the alleged assault. However, the CCTV footage and phone records showed that this was not accurate. Phone records also showed that she had attempted to call McGregor after he had left the hotel. Nikita claimed she didn't remember making the call and didn't know why she had done so.
Okay, so I think that to clarify what was going on there, she said that she had sent the text message immediately after the assault, and the records and CCTV footage showed that it was actually sent from the car park, so it was a decent amount of time afterwards, which also somewhat lends a little bit more credibility to the defense that, you know, she wasn't just sending this text message in the heat of the moment, just to kind of smooth things over, like, hey, send him a text, tell him you're okay, kind of thing. It was, everything was over. They're walking freely in the car park at this point, and she just texts him that she's okay then. So presumably she had gotten dressed, was continuing to, the end of the party or whatever they were doing at that point, but it wasn't immediately she was assaulted, then she sends the text. Either way, I mean, either one of those scenarios is not great for her reasoning here, but I think that the discrepancy doesn't help for sure.
The recording. As I mentioned, when Nikita Hand went home, her boyfriend recorded their conversation. It was McGregor's defense who submitted the audio. The conversation did contain a number of lies about her whereabouts, and she refused to name her alleged attacker. But as I said, many observers in court felt it may have actually supported her case by demonstrating her genuine distress and appearing to corroborate some details of her later allegations, such as being choked. McGregor...
Well, I mean, look, being choked in and of itself is not an indication necessarily of assault, unless in the moment you're not consenting to it, because of course, as we know, some people enjoy that. So I don't know, that's just, again, just putting it out there as a potential theoretical element of everything, not saying that that is one way or the other way factual or what the circumstances were. I feel bad for her boyfriend. This is why you can't trust anybody. 6 years later, he looks like a fucktard for letting her go out and party. I mean, what was he supposed to do, though? He didn't let her go out and party. She's a woman, grown woman who can make her own decisions. What he might have wanted to do was just break up with her on the spot. Like, yo, if you go out and party tonight with fucking Wild Man McGregor, then don't come home. But I mean, she made her own decisions when it comes to that. I don't really fault the boyfriend all that much. And also she lied to him too. So that's the other thing to keep in mind there. She lied to him about what she was doing, and she admitted that she lied to him. So can't really fault the boyfriend all that much in this one.
McGregor's testimony. McGregor provided his version of events, stating that the encounter with Miss Hand was consensual and athletic and vigorous.
Right.
He claimed there was no tampon present during their interaction, contradicting the medical evidence. He said
Yeah,
he did
that's
not
bad.
cause the bruising on Miss Hand's body. McGregor suggested alternative causes for Hand's injuries.
Oh, this is
He
all bad.
recalled her swan diving into the bathtub and suggested that she could have also been knocked about elsewhere during what he called her 3-day bender.
Okay, all of that is really, really dumb for Conor to have done. Literally all of that. Because all of that contradictory information, at least when it comes to the tampon, that's contradictory information, and these claims of her getting the bruising elsewhere, like, that is all really not great for him. Because with the tampon, now you've called, all of your stuff into question, just because it's, if you say one thing is one way and it is not that way, then now anything can be put into that same category. Well, he said it's one way, it wasn't that way, so maybe this wasn't that way, maybe this wasn't that way. So that's really bad. Him claiming that the bruising came from elsewhere, that was really dumb. That was probably the dumbest thing that he did in all of this, because he should have just said that the bruising did come from their encounter, but he was just getting really, really into it. Again, this is him just trying to cover, if he's trying to cover his ass. Her swan diving into the tub and all that kind of stuff, being knocked about elsewhere during her 3-day bender, I guess there is some potential merit to that. But you admitted that there was this encounter that was quote unquote athletic and vigorous. Probably should have just said, yeah, there was potential for her to get some bruising because of that, but that was just the way we were going at it. I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to dream up ways and aid him in circumventing a terrible crime that he did. I mean, if these are all facts of the case and he's presenting them in a factual manner, then, okay. But he was wrong about the tampon thing. So it's like, if you want, I would have consulted the legal team before making statements like that, because that does not help your case in any stretch. If you're being accused of sexual assault and she has a bunch of bruising and you say, no, that bruising did not come from the sexual encounter whatsoever, it's like, it had to have come from something. And I mean, her swan diving into a bathtub doesn't really, I don't know, as a potential jury member, jury number 1, Thinker St. James, I'd be like, I don't know about that one.
Beyond McGregor's testimony, we had James Lawrence's account. James Lawrence's testimony played a significant role in McGregor's defense.
Yeah, I'm interested
providing
about this
support
James
for
Lawrence
McGregor's claim
fellow.
of consent and challenging Nikita's account. Here's the key points of Lawrence's testimony. Lawrence testified that he observed flirtatious behavior between McGregor and Hand in the car on the way to the hotel and in the suite.
So, look, one thing that I think should be made pretty obvious here, and I know that Conor was maybe not necessarily the Conor that we know now back then, but one way or another, you're based on the framework that was outlined in the beginning of this video. You've got 2 girls hanging out with 2 guys to party, drink, and do a lot of cocaine. That, I think that you could just point blank period that one, right? I mean, yeah, I would think that there was definitely flirtatious behavior between them. I would think that it would have been almost a foregone conclusion that there was going to be sexual activity one way or another, whether it be between all 4 of them or 2 and 2 or however it shook out. I don't know. Just saying. When people party together like this, especially with that dynamic, 2 and 2, it seems like a foregone conclusion that something's going to go down in that regard. It's very rare that you have a bunch of people partying together like that in that combination of sexes, and they're just going to have a strictly platonic time. Just saying.
Also claimed to have seen them in the act, and she was in the top position. This testimony appeared to support McGregor's claim that she was a willing participant. Lawrence also claimed that he had consensual sex with Hand twice after McGregor left the hotel. So
Damn.
McGregor left the hotel with Danielle Keeley at around 6:15, and Lawrence and Hand remained in the hotel together, where Lawrence claims they had consensual sex.
I mean, look, again, these points are pretty strongly in favor of the McGregor side of the equation if they're true. I mean, you mean to tell me that she was so broken, battered, and in fear of her life that she stayed and did that twice consensually again, unless these are two claims of assault by this guy as well. But he's not a professional athlete as far as I know. He's not athletic and potentially as vigorous as McGregor. And he did it twice? 2 times. I mean, that would seem to signal that little bit of a bop going on. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that is the truth of the circumstances. This is just, if these things are true, this could all be a manufactured story by him as well. But I would think that if it happened twice, she probably, and she's alleging that it was all non-consensual as well, then there's got to be some factual nature to it, right? Because why would he be implicated otherwise?
Hand stated she had no memory of any sexual activity with Lawrence, describing his account as a made-up story. CCTV footage showed Hand being physically affectionate and flirtatious with Lawrence, which could be seen as supporting his account. However, a security guard who checked on the room 3 times when Lawrence and Hand were alone testified that he never saw them engaging in sexual activity or in a state of undress. Lawrence
could have just been quick. I don't know. I don't think I don't think that the security guard account really confirms or denies anything when it comes to that.
Stated he only saw a small bruise on Nikita, nothing like the extensive bruising shown in later photographs. So James Lawrence's testimony bolstered McGregor's defense and challenged the credibility of Hand's allegations.
I agree with
Danielle Keeley. Danielle Keeley's testimony provided another perspective of the events. Keeley stated that she was surprised to hear about the allegation. She said she didn't notice anything had happened when leaving the Beacon Hotel.
Yeah, I mean, come on. That is right there pretty damning. I mean, now, granted, they're not like close friends or anything, but I think that's more so why it would be even damning. Like, she's surprised. Everything seemed okay to her. So now you have 3 people. This is now 3 against 1 based on this dynamic.
She testified that no one was in bad form and everything was fine when McGregor and Hand came out of the bedroom. So she's providing some more support for McGregor's defense. Expert testimony. A forensic physician was called to give evidence. He mentioned that the anti-anxiety drug sertraline, Zoloft, which Miss Hand was prescribed, can increase the propensity for bruising. So he suggested that her prescription drugs could have been a contributing factor to the extensive bruising. In summary, the defense arguments mainly focused on the following: CCTV footage, inconsistencies in her story, prominent lapses in her memory of events. The defense questioned her credibility, highlighting lies Hand had allegedly told. They focused on contradictory testimony, not just from McGregor, but also from Lawrence and Keeley. They presented phone records that showed she had tried to call McGregor after he had left the hotel. McGregor offered alternative explanations of how her injuries might have occurred. They presented expert testimony on the potential role of her medication in exacerbating her bruising. Despite presenting this evidence and testimony, the jury ultimately found in favor of Nikita Hand, awarding her damages of approximately €250,000. Anyway, I feel like those are most of the relevant facts and considerations in the case.
So yeah, I mean, look, based on all of that, I'm not going to make a judgment one way or another. As I had said at the beginning of all of this, I certainly think that there is more than enough in there between both sides of the arguments to have this be something that cannot be definitively concluded. If you want my gut feeling about it, based on McGregor's side of the account and also Keely, her statements, it to me does not sound like a non-consensual incident personally. But I'm not making that judgment. I'm not going to have that be my judgment of call here. I'm not making any kind of judgment on it because you cannot know the truth. But there does seem to be enough contradictory evidence to make it at the very least completely inconclusive, and at its more severe, lean slightly more towards McGregor's side. That's just my personal take on it. I 100% admit that I could be completely wrong in that assessment. And as I had said, I don't think that anybody can know aside from McGregor and Miss Hand, but that's just how I'm seeing all of it.
If anyone feels like I omitted any major or important details on either side, please let me know. I don't want to overlook any important details.
Well, there you go. Based on all of that, I already kind of said where my conclusion lies. Now you can draw your own from it. Those are the facts of it. I'm glad that I know them all now. And again, shout out to Mixed Molly Whoppery for the great video. Have you had enough coverage of Conor McGregor yet? Feels like we've been asking that question since 2017 or so, but I know that I certainly have. However, we're back. We're back yet again to talk about Conor, and there's a good reason for it. The very talented, one of my favorite, if not my favorite, YouTubers on the platform, Mixed Molly Whoppery, put out a video originally about the Conor McGregor civil case, and it was to a T one of the best, most unbiased, factually just direct accounts of what happened in that case. I mean, definitely that I've ever seen, and probably that has ever been made about the case. I mean, really, it sounds hyperbolic, but if you synthesize the points that are important, the key points of interest, as one might say in business terms, you synthesize those down into a streamlined video. That's really what he did. And I reacted to that video, and it really helped inform how I looked at that case, because there's a lot of opinions about the Conor case on either side of the argument. There's a lot of extenuating circumstances regarding the case. So that same very talented gentleman has posted a follow-up video to it, and it is called McGregor's Appeal, What the Jury Never Saw. Unlike the first video, which I watched maybe 2 minutes of or so, minute to 2 minutes, just to see what it was like before we did the reaction, I have not seen anything from this video yet. I believe that it's similar. It might have more opinion-based stuff in it. I don't know. But I figured that if it's anything like the first video, it would be a good follow-up to the reaction that I did the first time and some of the initial quote-unquote reporting that I did on it, just some of the coverage that I did with talking about what facts were out there initially early on in the trial. So all of that being said, that is why we are doing this tonight. And hopefully this will be something interesting that will give us some more to chew on here. And then hopefully, this will be the last of the coverage of this case in general, unless some really, really bombshell news comes out in some capacity, because, as I said, I think that I am a little Conored out at this point. And based on some of the facts that we had learned in the first video and the way that they were presented versus the verdict that we got in that case, I think that it would be good to let this situation die down a little bit in general, because one way or another, no matter how you look at this case, somebody was done a great injustice on one side or the other, as I said. So, all right, let's take a look at it. This again is called McGregor's Appeal: What the Jury Never Saw by Mixed Mollywoppery. Here we go.
In the last video on this subject, I asked people to let me know if I had missed any important facts or details. And it turns out I did. I think I missed what could be critical details on both sides of the case.
All right, well then that's definitely makes this worth watching indeed. Because I thought that the first video was a rather comprehensive coverage of everything. So if these are facts that did not come out in the initial reporting, then perhaps maybe the opinion might change. Maybe this is an important addendum.
So I've got one major thing that could be relevant to McGregor, and then I want to clarify some timelines that I think could be relevant to Nikita's case. I'll start with McGregor. Now, I missed this whole thing. A friend of mine had to point it out to me. So as you might know, after the case, McGregor wasn't happy, and specifically, he mentioned that the jury did not hear all the evidence that the DPP reviewed. Now, in that video, I gave some reasons why the DPP, the prosecutors, had decided not to pursue the case. But the DPP mentioned one thing that I left out, and that was relevant witness statements from hotel staff and a taxi driver.
Aha! Well, that is something interesting now, isn't it? Relevant witness statements. Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to let this keep going, but yeah, obviously the eyebrows raised there.
So is it possible one of these statements is what Conor feels was left out of the case? Well, we can almost say for sure that it is, because there was a dramatic exchange between Nikita Hand's barrister and Conor McGregor during McGregor's cross-examination. Here's a clip from an Irish crime podcast.
And as well, I suppose then we had the incident where he was being cross-examined by Nikita Hand's team, and he jumped out of his chair. So he was being asked about his phone, and he sort of jumped out of his chair and threw his phone at, here you can have a pal, at her legal counsel.
Now, I've read a couple quotes.
Okay, hold on. So let me get this straight. Two things. One, podcasts like that were exactly why I didn't cover this case initially. And I'm not saying that that's not a diss towards that podcast. What I mean by that statement is I was only able to get information via podcasts like that. There was that podcast, and then there was another one. I forget the name of it, but it was two men talking about it, two Irish gentlemen discussing the case as well. And the reason I didn't want to use that was both of the podcasts that I found, that one and the other one, are very, very long. So it would have been a lot to sift through and react to, give my opinions about, and give their just due by allowing their unfettered thoughts, so to speak. And B, I don't know how much factual bending was going on these podcasts. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things that, of course, you want to believe that in a case as serious as this, people are going to be looking at it somewhat objectively, but you can't guarantee that. So I didn't feel comfortable using either of those podcasts, that one or the one that I had mentioned with the two guys. I didn't feel comfortable using either of those as the primary source for the information that I wanted to present myself and how I wanted to represent my own thoughts. So that's number one. Number two is that is a very interesting exchange that they're talking about here with McGregor jumping out of his chair and throwing his phone in court. That leads me to the third point, which is why the hell do we not just have the actual video footage of this? This would have made everything so much easier to cover and probably been a lot more, I hate to say entertaining, because in a case as serious and with such heinous circumstances, entertaining seems like a very callous way to present it, but it certainly would have been eye-catching and illuminating, I guess is a better way to put it. It would have illuminated this case a lot better to hear these things from Conor, to hear the potential witness, the potential victim in this case, hear all of the witnesses. That would have been a lot more it would have given a better picture of everything to actually hear it from a first-hand account. Because even that is still secondhand based on the fact that it's coming after the incident that they're all talking about. So we're getting everything third and fourth hand. So the fact that they're able to talk about it like they saw it happen, I guess perhaps those people might have been in the courtroom, whatever. Either which way, it's just very unfortunate that we weren't able to get the information as unfiltered as we could, which it would still be filtered, but it's like those powders that Conor's a fan of. The more they get stepped on, the more diluted they become. Realize what's up, my guy. Secondhand information is secondhand. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's certainly going to be the case, and third and fourth hand makes it even worse. But back to what we were talking about here with what made me pause in the first place. That's very interesting that Conor got that passionate, throwing his phone. That seems like that might have been something that in America could have gotten you found in contempt of court. So just an interesting thing there. Maybe his celebrity allowed him a little bit of leeway as far as something along those lines went, but that's speculation, of course.
And exchanges from the trial. And honestly, Conor didn't do himself any favors. Like, it's not a UFC press conference. If you're standing up and tossing your phone at the opposing lawyer or whatever it was, you're showing the jury that you're impulsive, you're unpredictable, and you're not taking the thing seriously. You're kind of presenting yourself as someone the jury might enjoy taking down a peg or two.
That's a really good point. I didn't necessarily think of it in those terms. I thought of it more as showing passion and incredulity, just based on the description at least. But he makes a very good point there. I mean, that's the type of thing that can certainly sway a jury. And also, I think that that's in and of itself a good point, that two different people can have two different perceptions of the same thing, and both of them can be very much leading to different conclusions based on how you interpret these things, especially considering, and this is not casting aspersion specifically based on gender, but the fact that you have a mix of men and women, very different perspectives in that regard as well. Perhaps if there was other dynamics and other factors to those individuals, every person's going to be different in how they perceive something like that. You would want to present yourself in as calm a manner as possible to try to negate some of that variance in how you're being perceived. So he's making a good point there.
But this is the important part of that exchange.
And then, of course, when he was shouting, the vitriol over at Nikki Hand about the evidence he wanted, I want all this evidence in the court, he did sort of,
And was he looking at her?
Over, and point over at her.
McGregor said he wanted the jury to have all the facts. He wanted everything out there.
Hold on, even before we go on, that is wild that he did that. I mean, granted, this is not a criminal trial, but if the way that you heard the way that lady described, I'm assuming that woman who they were talking to, the one sitting in the middle who's relaying the information, I'm sort of assuming that she was in the courtroom reporting on this case. I gotta believe if they're taking what she's saying as factually as they are. But either which way, I mean, even if she's exaggerating it, for him to have got up out of his chair and to point at the potential victim here, his opposite in this case, and launch, such pointed language at her. That does sound like McGregor for sure, but I would think that his legal team would have been squirming in their fucking chairs like, dude, shut the fuck up. What are you doing? Usually the judge is the one banging the gavel saying order in the court. His attorneys would have been like, dude, sit the fuck down and stop. You're making us look bad, man. Come on. Oh, but anyway, that's wild. That is some wild behavior. But again, the way that you could look at it, if you wanted to be generous towards McGregor, you could say that it's him being incredulous about such heinous accusations being hurled towards him and him being so passionate about clearing his name. I guess that's how he would present it. That's how he would describe what he was doing in that moment if he stepped back and had to analyze himself. Anyway.
there, including a statement from a taxi driver in which McGregor alleges the taxi driver saw Nikita performing oral sex on someone in the back of the car. Now, it's actually not clear who McGregor is referring to here, but we know she left in a taxi with James Lawrence. So it seems McGregor was alleging that a taxi driver made a statement that he witnessed Hand performing oral sex on Lawrence, and for some reason, the jury weren't allowed to consider that as part of the case.
So I'm assuming then, based on the timeline as I understood it from the first video, that would have been after the alleged assault took place. So he's saying that the taxi driver that the potential victim here left in, she left with one of the men she's accusing, that being James Lawrence, who is the associate of McGregor, one of the two, McGregor and the associate being the people accused in this case. She left with him, and the taxi driver apparently witnessed her performing oral sex on this man that she is accusing of the assault after the alleged assault took place. Interesting.
Now, this might sound like I'm giving Conor's words too much credibility in the heat of a volatile exchange where he could have been trying to manipulate the jury. But remember, this is not just coming from Conor. We know from the DPP that there is a taxi driver. He did make a statement. That statement was viewed by the DPP as relevant, but for some reason, it wasn't presented to the jury. So it is something. What are the implications?
Well, okay, so then we know... Tricky. So we know that the taxi driver made a statement, but we don't know exactly what that statement is. McGregor is saying that the statement is, as I just laid out there, but since it wasn't admitted, that can't be confirmed. Am I following that correctly? I'm going to go with that as being a correct assessment based on what we just heard, but not definitive necessarily. Still interesting.
Some people might think this is a sign that McGregor did not have a fair trial, but it's hard to say why the judge did not allow that as part of the case. I'm assuming it was the judge who blocked it. If McGregor was the lone defendant in the case, maybe you could argue that it was irrelevant or prejudicial, but James was a co-defendant and being accused of non-consensual sex, so a witness stating that he viewed them in a consensual act would seem extremely relevant to his defense.
Absolutely. 10,000% absolutely. I mean, that... I don't think that there's any two ways to look about that. To look at that statement. I think that is 100% relevant beyond just the... Even with McGregor being the sole accused, I think that there's still a potential for that to have some element of relevance. Now, I could understand and think that there would be a basis for her attorneys to get that thrown out. So were that the case, that was the argument that they were making, and it was thrown out. If he was the sole defendant, then yeah, I would say that sure, I could see it. I think that there probably would have been relevance, but it made sense that they angled that way, and if they got it, then that's just the legal system at work. But based on the fact that they are co-defendants, him being one of them, it's beyond relevant.
It would also clearly strengthen McGregor's case. McGregor's defense fell apart, in part because the jury did not find James Lawrence credible. A lot of people feel the jury found in favor of James Lawrence because they believed him over Nikita, but that's not actually what happened. There's a really strange dynamic here. The only reason James was a co-defendant in the case was because after Nikita accused McGregor of sexual assault, James came forward and made a statement claiming to have also had sex with Nikita. Nikita says she had no recollection of that, and so her reaction was, okay, if he wants to say we had sex, fine. but it wasn't consensual. And that's how James became a co-defendant. So you had this very strange situation where she had a case against James Lawrence for sexual assault, but she maintained throughout the case that she felt it was nonsense, that it never happened. It was just a made-up story as part of McGregor's defense.
Yeah. Strange indeed. I mean, that's a whole lot of information that is definitely odd. For him to have come forward, basically, I guess, as partially in defense of Conor, saying that they had consensual sex, and her to say, well, I don't remember it, so it must not have been consensual, and then turn it into a co-defense case. Yeah, I mean, he kind of got himself into the briar patch on that one, sort of got himself into a thorny situation that he didn't necessarily need to be in, but that also kind of does strengthen Conor's argument to an extent because he didn't have to say anything. You know, I mean, granted, you could say, oh, well, he said it, he kind of put his own foot in his mouth by saying that. But if he was literally just doing it to tell the truth. Now, I mean, you got a lot of different people with a lot of different motives saying a lot of different things. So, you know, it might be a little bit of a stretch to say that he was just saying it purely out of respect to the truth. But if he was, then I think that it would absolutely bolster Conor's case and turn this into an even more complex web of dynamics in this whole thing. So yes, that is an extremely odd set of circumstances, to be sure.
And the jury ultimately believed her version over James, that they never had sex. And that explains how James was found not liable, but also why his testimony wasn't very helpful to McGregor. They didn't believe him. And just to be clear, I'm not speculating about the jury here. This is according to the judge. The reason the judge did not make Nikita pay James legal fees was because, as I've said, he felt the jury had not found in James' favor because they believed his story. They found in his favor because they believed Nikita's story. So the jury...
That's fucking wild. So, yeah, I mean, add in the part about the taxi driver, and this becomes even more crazy. Damn, I am really glad that we're watching this one now, because this throws a whole bunch of fucking wrenches into things. So, let me take a quick step back here. There's a taxi driver that says that he saw Lawrence getting oral sex performed on him by the alleged victim. The alleged victim claims that that didn't happen, and also that they did not have sex at all. He's claiming they did have sex. The judge says, no, you didn't. Her word versus him on whether there was any sexual encounter whatsoever. Judge says no. I'm curious as to who this judge is, because the one thing that does stick out here, something I don't think that I really mentioned too much in the first video, but upon rewatching my own reaction to it, I wanted to make a point when it was appropriate. This does seem like the point that it would be appropriate to say. It would seem, based on some of this evidence, or some of the circumstances, I should say, not evidence in the official sense, but some of these circumstances, it would appear to me that this judge had a little bit more of a guiding hand in this case than an impartial adjudicator of the law should have had. I am positing here that this judge may have steered the course of this case a little bit more than a judge should have involved themselves. Perhaps I'm completely off base here, but I think after hearing what we just heard and based on the facts leading up to what we just heard, that does seem to be the case to me. Just saying.
Jury felt James' whole favor because they believed Nikita's story. So the jury felt James' whole story had been cooked up to defend Conor McGregor and ruin Nikita's image in the court. And that's why the taxi driver would seem to be significant. Like, it would be much harder for the jury to believe they never had sex if you had a taxi driver saying he saw her performing oral sex on James. So if it was credible, and if it was as McGregor described, which are both big ifs, it's difficult to imagine why it wouldn't have been allowed into the case. Now, this might sound like I'm making a massive argument for Conor, but actually I would be reluctant to interpret it in that manner. And here's why. Here's the thing a lot of people don't understand about the Irish judicial system. Irish judges, they call them druids, and they're kind of a mysterious group. They're kind of like Irish shamans. They have rituals and they write poetry and they drink little potions that allow them to communicate with entities from other dimensions. And that's how they make their decisions. No.
Okay. I was like, wait a second here. First of all, I did want to pause a little bit earlier, but I wanted to kind of let that go. I'm assuming that this is based on that is all jokes. But I did want to say that even if he was even if he's joking about this part of it, that I don't think that necessarily is like a full-on like case for McGregor just based on that. I think that it's really more of an indictment of the DPP. I think it's more of an indictment of the police as to like why the relevance wasn't seen or why the judge didn't allow it. That's the bigger driving force than it being a case for Conor. And honestly, it wouldn't even really matter whether you're making a case for Conor or not. If it's a fact of the case and it was not allowed, a fact that plays a very large part in the case, then it doesn't matter whose side of the equation it helps. It should be entered into the evidence by nature of being relevant. That's my point there.
Despite the funny costumes and the hilarious wigs, Ireland is a modern country with a respected judicial system that comes with all the standards and practices you'd expect. So this judge isn't just a law unto himself with no oversight. He has to be able to justify his decisions within the context of Irish law. He can't just decide he wants to omit certain facts because he doesn't like McGregor's face. And I'm sure this is the last case he'd ever pull some ridiculous stunt, for multiple reasons. First of all, McGregor has the resources and representation to hold the judge accountable with respect to the legal standards that have to be met. If the judge cut corners or did not meet whatever legal standards are in place, Conor's team would bend him over their knee and legally spank the fuck out of his ass. But it's not just the resources Conor has, it's also the scale of the spectacle. This is, I'd have to imagine, the most high-profile case the judge will have in his entire career. So like if Conor makes an appeal, and the appeal has success on the basis of shady or unfair decisions made by the judge, that would be a huge black mark on his career.
So yeah, that's basically going towards what I was just saying before, that this judge did sound like he was overstepping, or maybe overstepping is a little bit of a stretch. It sounded like he was steering the course of the case in a certain direction a little bit more so than being entirely impartial, based on the denial of certain pieces of evidence. That's what the perception I was getting. And mind you, I had made that assessment. I didn't say it at the time. I should have said it in the first video, but I had made that assessment based on rewatching my reaction to the first video and the facts of the case as they were presented there. So this is really just a reinforcement of a thought that I had already had based on that first telling of the incident in court and how it all played out.
They'd have to overturn the result or do a whole new trial because of this guy's incompetence. It'd be an embarrassment for the judge. And for that reason, I'd feel reasonably confident that the judge can defend his decision in a legal context.
Well, I mean, maybe not. Maybe not. You'd think that. You'd certainly hope that, but I remember very distinctly not too long ago seeing a video about a judge that ended up getting disbarred, or whatever the judge's equivalent of being disbarred is. I don't know if they're part of the same bar that the lawyers are, but getting derobed? I don't know. Either way, I know that for a fact that I saw a case just recently where a judge was relieved of their judging duties for being essentially an activist judge in some capacity. I don't think it was a politically activist thing that they were doing, but an activist on behalf of one of the parties involved in a case, where they were manipulating the case to an extent in favor of one party over the other, and it led to them being it led to their power being stripped. So who knows? Who knows here? This judge could have some preconceived notions about Conor. This judge could have people in their past who have been victimized, perhaps. There's a whole number of reasons that a judge could be active one way or another. I'm just putting it out there. Again, I don't think that we really have enough concrete on either side of that to make a fair assessment there either. But as Wapari is saying here, hopefully that judge can have a full-on explanation for all of this. Because apparently if and when it goes to appeal, which it looks like it's going to, that would certainly be a part of the case that is going to play a big part in all of this. And this is also something that you really got to keep in mind when it comes to this. The fact that it goes to appeal, even if Conor wins on appeal, the damage is already done currently. He's lost his endorsements with Proper 12. He's lost the video game likeness agreement that he had with the Hitman video game. He's being dragged through the mud on social media. His image has been tarnished one way or another. Now, as I said in the first video, is it going to be something that's going to ruin him entirely? I doubt it, personally. I still, even with all of those facts being as they are, I still don't think that it's going to be the end of Conor McGregor as we know it. However, the fact that it got to where it has gotten because of this ruling cannot be undone. And a lot of people, and you know that this is true, a lot of people in the court of public opinion are not going to care if he wins on appeal because he lost here. So if this judge was manipulating this case in any way, the damage is done. And I think that would be something that they would have to answer for. If it's true, it could certainly be a whole bunch of wild hogwash. But if it's true.
So, I'd be reluctant to read too much into it. There is something that doesn't quite make sense here. If the taxi driver was referring to James Lawrence, surely James would have mentioned this as part of his own defense. So it's very strange. I can't work it out. Maybe the taxi driver was referring to himself and not James Lawrence.
That's actually a good point, too. As we had said earlier, I guess the whole thing was that there was a statement made by the taxi driver about someone receiving oral sex from this alleged victim. Maybe it wasn't James Lawrence. I guess he's making a really good point there that James Lawrence could have brought this up in the case himself. If he chose not to, I would assume also, and this is definitely an assumption on my part, but I've got to believe it to be the case that James Lawrence had his own legal representation. They weren't being co-represented. So, yeah, confusion continues to abound here.
But I mean, there's all sorts of problems with that too. So it's hard to understand the whole thing. But we'll see. I think we will find out just how relevant it is. If you read between the lines, this will probably be a big part of Conor's appeal. You know, you can't just appeal the decision. because you don't like it. You know, this is not Nate Diaz. I feel like I was inefficient with my testimony, so let's go again. He needs a solid reason for an appeal, and this is what he's mentioned being unhappy about. He doesn't feel the jury saw all the evidence, and he specifically mentioned the taxi driver. So the judge's decision to block that is likely to be scrutinized as part of McGregor's appeal process.
Is that the case always in civil trials? I was under the impression that, and I could be completely wrong about this, so this is something that you should probably disregard, and it's really more me speaking my own ignorance out loud. But I was under the impression that because you can bring anyone to trial civilly for any reason, at least as the United States legal system works, you can bring any person to a civil trial for any reason, that you could also appeal essentially an unlimited amount of times. That all does not sound necessarily correct based on me saying it out loud, so all of that could be incorrect. Again, I might just be speaking my own ignorance out loud. But if he is correct here and that there needs to be a definitive precedent for an appeal to be made, then yes, I would agree that that would certainly be a legitimate basis. Conor is going to be okay now if it was a minor. Yes, completely over. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely that. But again, minor or not, I mean, you know, yes, that would make the dynamic entirely different. But either way, the damage currently is still done, is still kind of the point as well in that. So yeah, long term, probably okay. In the moment, though, yes, if it was a minor, it would be 10 times worse, but even 10 times less impactful than that, still bad. Still a lot of money off the table for Conor at this point. Look at Mike Tyson, what he went to prison for in the early 2000s. Yeah, that is a good point. And that's what I was saying earlier, is that I don't think that this is the end of Conor. Yeah, a minor, yeah, that probably would be a completely different story. You never get to wash away that stain, regardless of the truth, as unfortunate as that may be. You know, if he was found civilly liable in this case, if he was found civilly liable in a case like that and then found innocent on appeal, you're right. It would certainly be all over. But thankfully, that's not the case. Good Lord, that would make this whole thing 10 times worse. Clonky, what's going on? Good to see you. Welcome.
So we'll see how the whole appeal plays out. The other thing I want to discuss is that a lot of people have come down on McGregor's side on the trial, and they cannot understand how a jury could possibly side with a woman whose story is so full of holes. Now, no matter where you've landed on things, we have to be honest about the reliability of Nikita Hand. A lot of people make a big deal out of her lying to her boyfriend, and maybe that does speak to her character in a way that is relevant. But
okay, before I wanted to stop this before he goes too far deep into these points, because I will say, and this is perfectly visible on the first video, I will say that based on all of the facts as they were presented, and as I have stated as well, I do believe that I think that you can kind of hear it in the way that it's being presented here, aside from little bits of humor that are not related to the specific incidents of the case. I think that Mixed Molly Whoppery has been very, very unbiased in most of this. Based on that unbiased account of the facts as they were presented, I would class myself in the camp as he is describing here. And if you've watched this channel for any length of time, you would know I am not a Conor McGregor glazer by any stretch of the imagination. If there's ever anybody who would be the first person to side opposite Conor with sufficient evidence, I would say it would be me. I consider Conor to be a megalomaniac, borderline sociopath, if not full-on sociopath, who has surrounded himself with so many yes men and diluted his mental state so dramatically with substances that he is a danger to himself and others, I would say. All of that being said, however, based on the facts purely, I would class myself in the way that Mixed Molly Whopper is describing here. I wanted to get that out of the way to let my own opinions based on the account be known up front so that it's a clear and present presentation of it, but know that it is only based on the facts as they have been presented. I think that's important. You blame the cocoa? Probably not a bad place to lay some blame.
A lot of people make a big deal out of her lying to her boyfriend, and maybe that does speak to her character in a way that is relevant. But the bigger issue for me is not the lies. It's that when she was trying to give an honest account of the truth, when she was trying to tell the truth, it seems she just couldn't do it. And this was not only a matter of minor discrepancies, like where she was when she sent certain messages. Those details aren't that important. This was bigger things, like she completely invented and imagined extremely stressful and dramatic scenarios that verifiably did not happen. And I'll give you one example. The first person Nikita spoke to about the events of that day was her manager, Emer Brennan. She spoke to Emer shortly after James Lawrence left her in the taxi. So she didn't go home. She went to Emer's house. And Nikita told her that she had kind of escaped from the hotel. She had been worried that McGregor's security were going to assault her. And so she ran from the hotel car park and got into a taxi. And that's how she got away. You know, very action movie-esque. As we know, she left the hotel in a calm manner in a taxi with James Lawrence. You know, there was no dramatic escape like she described to Emer.
Yeah. Just wanted to pause real quick to add a little bit of context. When he's saying her manager, he's referring to her manager at, I believe, the hair salon that she works at. So not a manager of professional image or anything like that. And I also did want to say that that was a big part, the fact that she is having a very unreliable recollection of the actual allegations, the actual alleged assault. She has a very unreliable recollection of that. So to use that unreliable recollection as fact seems to me to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, issue with this whole case as it's been presented. Why didn't she just call the police right then and there? Yeah, Beeb. Yeah. Again, I mean, what the counter argument to that, and I guess the counter argument to what I just laid out there with the unreliable nature of all of this, is that she was in a heightened, distressed state. Suppose that would be how she would describe it after being traumatically assaulted, just trying to get herself removed from the situation, maybe being confused, maybe not knowing what to do in the moment because of how it affected her. Trying to get herself to safety. But again, that contradicts the fact, which we know from the CC video footage, of her calmly walking out with James Lawrence. So you make a good point. Now, she did go to the police after the fact, but you would think perhaps, and and this is where it gets into that territory where I'm like, I don't want to speculate too much because we weren't there. We don't know, but you would think that, I don't think it would be unreasonable to think that your number one priority would have been to A, remove yourself as quickly and painlessly as possible, and B, get yourself to a place where you could find help. Now, whether it was immediately calling the police or going to knock on random doors, we've seen things like that before where people have been kidnapped or otherwise forcibly put into positions that they did not want to be in, where the second that they get the ability to escape from their captors, they go just haphazardly looking for help. So if she is out in a taxi, why don't she talk to the taxi driver to take her to the police station? Going to any person who would listen to her, screaming her head off, running down the street. You know, if it was the middle of the day, I don't remember exactly what time of day it was. It might have been the nighttime. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. Anytime, day or night. I would think that the two priorities would have been to A, get away from her attackers, and B, get help. So, you're making good points. Your 2 cents are she wanted to get... Okay. She wanted to get some, and now she is claiming SA for some cash. Just your opinion. I mean, as the facts of the case goes, it's... I hesitate to make a definitive statement that way, the same way that I did in the first video breakdown of the original video made by Mixed Wally Whoppery, but I would certainly say that I tend closer towards that side than legitimacy, and only because of the unreliability of the facts. That's where the issue is here. It's not any predisposition towards Conor. I couldn't give a fuck about Conor when it comes to his celebrity, his status in the mixed martial arts world, his money, his influence, any of that kind of stuff. All of that goes out the fucking window. To me, he is just a man who has been accused of something heinous, and this is the person that's accusing him, and these are her facts. Based on those set of circumstances, I tend to believe in that direction, as Beeb has laid out, more so primarily because of the lack of definitive accounting here. The lack of clear recollection. Anyway.
And I wouldn't doubt that she believed her story at the time. So just being honest here, she was in a very bad state and simply not interpreting reality in a reasonable manner.
And that goes to what I had just said, Beeb. You know, that she was in a heightened state of, mania, so to speak. There's, trauma. She was in a heightened state of trauma. The incident was only roughly a few hours, if that, old. If that, technically in the grand scheme of things, really only a limited number of minutes passed. So that would be the counter argument.
She gave multiple different accounts of the events to different people. Her manager got one version, the boyfriend got another version, and the police got another one. And we also know she forgot very significant portions of the day. So she was forgetting things, she was inventing things, she was mixing stories up, and she was lying. That's not a character assassination from me. Those things are verifiably true. So I think people are just shocked. How could the jury have possibly found against McGregor? And a lot of people are saying this suggests bias or a conspiracy against McGregor.
Before he goes into, I'm sure he's going to give his opinion about that, I would think anyway. I don't think that. That I do not think. I don't think that there is any kind of grand conspiracy necessarily against McGregor as far as the jury goes. I would think that it really comes down to the individuals that were chose for this jury and their temperament, and possibly the atmosphere in the country of Ireland in general. Just by nature of how societally they view these types of allegations, and B, how McGregor is perceived by the individuals. I don't think that there's any kind of coordinated effort amongst the jurors to say, hey, you think that this way about Conor, you think this way, you think this way, you think this way, we all think this way together, let's make this happen like this. I don't think that that's the case. I think that if anything, there may be extenuating socio-political climates that are specific to the individuals. I hope I'm conveying this information in a way that makes sense, but I think that there are socio-political leanings per person that may come into account when it comes to a case like this, whether conscious or unconscious. You know, every person has a different relationship with these types of allegations and how they perceive them, what emotions are elicited because of these types of allegations, and thus how they respond to these types of allegations, just baseline, just at their core. So you take that, you layer that with the facts as they are presented, you layer that with the perception of the accused, you layer that with the perception of the accuser. It's a lot of layers. And I think that is more of what gets you to a conclusion like the one that was reached as opposed to a grand conspiracy.
So I want to take a shot at how the jury might have arrived at their decision, because it's very likely that in a civil case with a low burden of proof, instead of looking at every detail and every inconsistency, they could have distilled this whole case down to a couple of relevant questions and then simply answered those questions with what they felt was most likely. Now, I know that sounds nuts, but that's the nature of a civil case.
Well, then, I mean, okay, if that's how you want to present that, then what are those questions and what were the answers, and what, because of those answers, steered the ship in that direction would be how I would counter that. And does that make sense? You know, were those questions and answers enough to be correct, for lack of a better way to phrase it? I don't know.
So the first thing I want to discuss here is the extent of her injuries. I see a lot of people suggesting various explanations of the bruises. The most common explanations appear to be the following: an accident or a fall. You know, McGregor said she swan dived into the bathtub, so like she could have banged into something, or even a series of accidents. Another possibility would be rough sex. And of course, we have the whole reason for the trial, the possibility that the injuries were the result of an assault. I'm sure there's other theories, but those are the main ones. Now, 2 medical examiners agreed that the injuries were compatible with Nikita's story. But let's take a look at the injuries, and you can kind of get a sense yourself. For me, a fall or a series of accidents doesn't seem to make sense, but listen for yourself. An abrasion on the right side of her jaw, which had been bleeding, a purple bruise on the right side of her neck that looked like a love bite. On her right arm, 3 purple bruises consistent with fingertip bruising, a bruise midway down her forearm, and 2 separate purple bruises on her lower arm. Purple bruising on the knuckles of her right hand that was tender on examination. Now, the purple bruising on her knuckles will be important later in the video, so just make a mental note of that.
Just off rip, yeah, that does not sound like a fall. I didn't think that it was a fall based on the initial, the initial video and the way that it was presented. Then I was like, I thought that it was extremely stupid that Conor would have even insinuated that the injuries that she had sustained in that evening, you know, throughout the course of that evening, had anything to do with falling in that regard. I did say that some people do bruise easily, so there is some potential for her maybe to have had worse bruising than one might have had they encountered a rough intercourse or something along those lines. If she was bumping into a whole hell of a lot of stuff, perhaps, but I mean, it seemed very tenuous at best to think that her injuries were sustained based on her being somewhat clumsy. She would have had to have fallen downstairs or something along those lines for anywhere near the amount of injuries across her body in that regard to have been sustained.
On her left arm, a purple bruise on her upper arm, 2 separate bruises on the elbow joint, an abrasion on the elbow with 3 separate linear abrasions below this, and 4 separate bruises on her lower arm, a purple bruise on her right shoulder, a purple bruise on the right side of her upper back. That's already a lot. But listen to these ones. Extensive bruising on her buttocks, with 3 separate bruises consistent with a handprint on her left buttock, a purple bruise on her right breast, and a 9-centimeter scratch on her left breast. 2 separate purple bruises on the left flank of her abdomen. 4 separate purple bruises on the front of her right thigh. 2 separate purple bruises on her right kneecap, and bruising on her left thigh. 4 of her acrylic nails were missing.
That's a lot. I mean, that is a lot of injuries. Now, again, could these be consistent with rough consensual sex? I would still tend to say that they could be. I mean, again, based on the athleticism that was mentioned in this case by Conor himself, and thinking back to where he was in his career, what condition he was in as an athlete at the time. I mean, you know, depending on how many different positioning of bodies there were, where in the room those positions took place, how much motion was involved. I think that there's certainly consistency there for it being, possibly consensual, but it is a lot of damage for it to be consensual for sure. I would certainly say that is, something that leans in favor of the plaintiff here, because as Beeb's saying here, broken nails are kind of wild. I mean, a bunch of this is. I mean, look, for as rough as sex sometimes can be, I mean, this amount of bruising certainly does lend itself to the assumption just by itself that it was very, very rough. Very, very rough. Again, some people want it to be that rough, perhaps. But I'm not saying that she is one of those people, and I'm not saying that is the reality of this situation. So all of this talk of injury certainly does, I think, bolster her case in a real way. Could it have still been consensual? Absolutely, I think it could have been still. But based on the amount of damage and the type of damage that they're describing here, it certainly does lend some credibility to the accusation.
So, I'm not an expert, but reading that, you can certainly understand why the medical examiners felt all this was the result of a sexual assault. It certainly doesn't sound like she fell in a bathtub, and the potential fingertip bruising and handprint suggests that it wasn't.
Yeah, and that's why I had said that it was absolutely asinine for Conor to have insinuated that was the case in the first place. No amount of... She could have jumped and swan dived into the bathtub 700 times and not received those injuries from that action. So I thought it was absolutely ludicrous to think that Conor would have postulated that was how she got those injuries. Again, she would have had to have been falling downstairs ass over tea kettle for anywhere near that type of damage to have been done to her body. So it was really very dumb of Conor to insinuate that was the case in the first place.
But so what? That doesn't in itself prove McGregor was responsible for those injuries.
That's true, and I think that it would have been better for him to take responsibility for the injuries and say, we were just going really, really rough. Because I think that is the only way that it really does like make it any type of questionable, because it's way worse to say, no, I didn't have any part in those injuries, when she had so many of those injuries and you were there and you know that there was some kind of sexual encounter at all. I'm not saying it's a good argument, but I'm saying they're a good statement. But I'm saying that you're kind of painted into a bit of a corner. You only have so many options, and saying that she got him from a bathtub fall is not the best one, in my estimation.
And that's what they had to try to figure out. When did those injuries likely occur? Is it possible she had the bruises before meeting McGregor? Now, I'm not going to go into all the reasons I think that's unlikely. There's multiple reasons, but I think the biggest one is that McGregor admits having sex with her, and he didn't mention those marks. If she already had some bruising and cuts, that would be his entire defense. I didn't do that. She already had them. When presented with the images of the bruises in court, McGregor said he was shocked, and at another point, he specifically said there was no scrape.
There's no way that she had those injuries before this encounter. There's no way that she had those injuries before this evening. I mean, that, look, is it cosmically possible? I mean, is there some, reality where it could be maybe some shred of possibility there? I guess, you can't say never, but I would be beyond shocked if that was the case. And I just don't think there's really any two ways about it. Him being shocked by the photographs of the injuries, I don't really take too much away from that. McGregor is a person who is as calculating as you can be in a situation like this. So, him being able to feign shock doesn't surprise me. Him saying that there was no scrape, again, I don't really... He's defending himself in a trial with very damning allegations against him. I don't think that anything that he presents outwardly or says is going to make much of a difference as to the perception, in my opinion. Are lie detector tests valid in situations like this? I don't think so. Lie detector tests are inadmissible in court in general, so I would assume that extends to civil cases. He probably could have taken a voluntary lie detector test if he had so chosen to. That might have, there might have been, that's a great question, Beeb, honestly. I'm speculating a little bit here. I do know that lie detector tests are inadmissible in criminal trials. I don't know how their standing is when it comes to civil cases. In fact, let's see. And this is going to be, I would assume, in terms of America, but we can at least gain a little bit of insight here, because I do like that question. Lie detector tests, also known as polygraph tests, are generally not admissible in court. So what they're saying here is just not admissible in court, period. I mean, and of course, this is AI, so take this with a grain of salt here. Lie detector results are admissible when both the prosecution and the defense stipulate to their admissibility at trial, a preliminary hearing, or other hearings. So there you go. If both sides of the trial had said that it would have been admissible, at least, of course, based on American law, I can't say that this is 100% accurate to Irish law. That would be a little bit harder to find online here. I'd have to do a little bit more digging, but at least based on Greg Hill and Associates, who knows how reputable these lawyers are, but with a little bit of a grain of salt, based on it being the internet, this website, at least, which Google thinks is reputable enough to be a source, says that lie detector tests their results are admissible when both the prosecution and defense stipulate to their being admissible during a trial or preliminary hearing or other hearing. So I guess that somewhat answers the question. As of today, 23 states still consider polygraph tests to be admissible in court. So I didn't realize that there were actually states that full on do not allow them at all. That's kind of interesting. However, the majority of those states require the approval of both parties before they can be submitted. So, okay, there's a little corroboration on that element. Also, in most cases, the polygraph test is not being used in a criminal case, but rather in civil court. Such as if there was an issue that prevented a person from getting a job or gaining security clearance. So, okay, so I guess then this is saying that if both parties in a civil case, this is saying that they're more so used in civil cases as opposed to criminal cases. So I guess the answer would be yes if both sides had agreed to it. Very interesting. Thank you very much for that very pertinent point there, Beeb.
And obviously bruises take time to appear. But it wasn't just bruises. It was bruises and cuts and abrasions and scratches and missing fingernails. You know, he would have noticed something. And surely that would constitute his entire defense. She already had the injuries. So it doesn't seem likely that she had them. Now, the phrase doesn't seem likely might seem extremely loose when discussing a crime. But you have to always remember, we are dealing in terms of probabilities in this case, not in terms of certainties. The question then becomes, in what window did the bruising occur? What is the first verifiable mention of the bruising? A lot of people think it's the recording with her boyfriend. But actually, as I said, Nikita Han did not go home after James Lawrence left her in the taxi. She went to her manager, Emer Brennan's house. And Emer Brennan is one of the people who testified in the case. Now, according to Emer Brennan, Nikita named McGregor as her attacker. She said Nikita appeared to be shook. And critically, Emer says she saw the bruises at this point. She even claims she took photos of Nikita's bruises, but later deleted the photos when the story broke.
What? Beg your pardon? She had photographic evidence that would have been extremely pertinent to this case and deleted it? That is beyond wild to me. Why? Why would she have thought that that was a good idea? Why would that have been something that she would have done if she had that? I mean, if you take that at face value, then I could have said that I have photographic evidence of the actual crime being committed. I just deleted them. Any of his security guards could have said that. Bro, this is now blowing my fucking mind real quick. Okay, if that is the case, if she is allowed to say that and testify with that information in court, then all of Conor's security guards could have been like, yo, we all saw them having sex. She was fucking loving it. We have pictures of her smiling and having a great time during it. Deleted them, bro. You know? Heard that it was going to trial, and for some reason, I just deleted those off of my phone. Because that's literally the way that it's being presented here. I mean, and I'm giving Mixed Molly Whoppery a lot of credit here, saying that the way that he's presenting it is 100% factual. So, gotta even keep, Mixed Molly Whoppery in perspective in all of this. But if that is true, if she deleted those pictures when it broke, when the story itself became public, then literally anyone that was in the room at the time could have said the exact same fucking thing. Am I nuts here? That seems insane to me. That seems fucking insane to me. Deleted proof. Fail indeed. That is beyond a fail. Again, that blows everything wide open as far as the burden of proof, or the beyond a reasonable doubt element of justice. Because again, anybody could have said, McGregor himself could have been like, or James Lawrence, either one of them could have said, oh man, I have pictures of her doing this. Security man number 1 or 2 has pictures of this. The fucking taxi cab driver could have had pictures of her performing oral sex on somebody, basically. I mean, we don't know who it is, but it could have been. Just got deleted. And am I crazy also in thinking that all phones, if not the majority of smartphones, which at the time were a thing, you know, this is going back a number of years, but smartphones were certainly already a thing. Don't most phones keep deleted images? Isn't there a way to recover deleted images off of phones? I mean, maybe she didn't transmit them somewhere and the phone could have gotten damaged or whatever. Again, you know, we're stretching a little bit here, but if she's saying that she had photographic evidence of something happening and then she just arbitrarily deleted it, I mean, I'm really fucking caught off guard by that. My head is kind of spinning on that one. Oi.
Because both women were concerned by the media attention. After visiting Emer Brennan,
yeah, that's why you don't delete it. They're concerned with the media attention. You give it to the police. What the fuck? Okay. All right.
Women were concerned by the media attention. After visiting Emer Brennan, Nikita went home. And that's when the boyfriend made the 38-minute recording. Some people think the boyfriend might have inflicted the injuries, but it's worth noting a couple things. They were discussing the injuries in the recording. The boyfriend was being sympathetic, like he wasn't angry. He was even saying he would take a day off work the next day to take her for a medical exam. And he was saying he wants her to report the crime. He was pushing her to report it. Like in the recording, she's begging the boyfriend not to get the police involved. And he matter-of-factly states this is not being kept a secret. But anyway.
Well, I mean, and again, this is wild speculation, and I'm not saying that there's any fact to it. But could there not have been collusion there where he inflicted some of these injuries and then I guess it really depends on when this recording took place in relation to when she arrived with him, because what I was going to say, and again, this is completely speculation and I don't necessarily think it's true in any stretch of the imagination, but if we're thinking about could the boyfriend have inflicted these injuries, could she not have gotten some of the injuries in the evening, namely the ones that were visible to her manager? The ones on her hands, I believe, is what they had said about those. Could she have not gotten some injuries to her hands and then had further injuries inflicted upon her body by her boyfriend, who then put on a performance in the recording? That's highly, highly conspiratorial and would seem to be a very, very large leap of a statement to make. But I posit it only because of we're considering all kinds of avenues here. I only bring something like that up because if you're asking, is there a possibility that the boyfriend was involved in that way? That would be your one shred of possibility as I see it.
In the recording, she mentions that her body was sore, which could allude to the bruises. And she mentions that she had been choked 3 times. The paramedic later mentioned bruising on her neck. She also tells her boyfriend to look at her knuckles from fighting back. As I mentioned earlier, when talking about her injuries, she did have bruised knuckles. So I think a reasonable interpretation of that conversation would be that it seems to be the earliest solid verification of the injuries.
Either that, or, I mean, what I would counter that with is that why was the boyfriend so calm about it, even if that was even if he believed the account that she was giving of there being a sexual assault? Because certainly there could have been a reality where she comes back with all of these injuries and having sustained an attack in that regard, and her boyfriend says, well, you lied to me about where you were. You lied to me about getting into some type of intimate situation in the first place, which, to, you know, in his words, I guess in this scenario I'm laying out, be like, you know, well, you put yourself in the lead up to this type of encounter. It sounds to me that this encounter just got out of hand, but you started off being in a situation that you were comfortable with. So my point is that, is there not some reasonable expectation of there being some type of anger? So if that is the logic, again, one step further down in this completely made up scenario, but if that is the logic, that yes, there could have been some element of being upset because, wow, my girlfriend lied to me and went out and had a sexual encounter of any kind, whether it have been an assault or otherwise, but put herself in a situation where she's out partying with random guys that aren't me. Then even if she had been in this situation, wouldn't there still be some level of upset? And if there would have been, if that is a logical, reasonable thing to assume in this scenario, then perhaps he inflicts a few more injuries, then the recording starts. Again, completely wild speculation. I do not believe any of that stuff. But we're talking over scenarios that have some shred of possibility, because we have to look at this thing in such an abstract way, since there is no verifiable reality to a lot of it. A lot of holes in this story on both sides, a lot of holes in the memory of the accuser. So it's like, if there are holes here, how much, you're looking at a piece of Swiss cheese. How much of the Swiss cheese is actual cheese and how much of it is air? How much of it is holes? So we're stretching in a lot of directions that I don't necessarily believe are true. I'm just saying, if we have to stretch it all, this is how far Stretch Armstrong can get his arms to go. If that happened to your girlfriend, you would have no sympathy at all. I mean, I think that that's a little callous, and I think it would have been callous for this guy to feel that way. But I think that it certainly would have been appropriate for there to be mixed emotions as opposed to just complete sympathy. At the very least. Again, everybody's going to react differently to stuff like that. You don't know the temperament of that guy in general. Perhaps he is a little bit of a pushover. Perhaps he's, somebody who just is really, really, really in touch with his emotions and can compartmentalize. Perhaps he has studied stoicism to a degree that few people in reality can ever achieve. Just saying. I think that there is some reasonable expectation for there to be some sort of anger in some capacity. I think that would be a normal human reaction. Even if you are processing everything and then come to a sympathetic conclusion thereafter. I still think that there would be some level of, damn, what the fuck? Can't believe that you went out, lied to me, partied behind my back, did a whole mess of drugs, drank a whole lot of liquor with one of the most famous people in this country who is a known horn dog. Anyway, I digress.
And of the allegation of sexual assault. And that was approximately 3.5 hours after she left James Lawrence. Just to conclude the sequence of events, for anyone who's interested, what happened next was that Nikita didn't want to go to the police. Her boyfriend went to work the next day, and she went to her mother's. Her mother saw the injuries and called the paramedics, and that's how the case began. But anyway, if the jury believed Emer Brennan, then that would mean they believed she had the injuries very shortly after saying goodbye to James Lawrence in the taxi.
I also want to just note that it is kind of interesting to an extent too there that she's saying she didn't want to go to the police. That does sort of lend itself to the mentality of of someone who has been victimized. That's a very common reaction, as far as I can tell. You hear that a lot because that's always the question. Why didn't they go to the police? Why didn't they go to the police? I would think that in this case, there would be a number of reasons why she wouldn't immediately go to the police. And, it would make sense only in the sense that she knows what she's up against when it comes to someone as powerful and as influential as McGregor, because you also have to keep in mind, this is the height of McGregor's power and influence. This is just about a year or so, I believe, less than a year after the Maymack fight, after the money fight. So, again, trying to look at this objectively, that certainly does lend a little bit of credibility to her. If everyone's saying she didn't want to call the police because she was too traumatized, her mother saw the injuries and she called the paramedics out of concern for her daughter. So fair's fair on that one.
If the jury believed Emer Brennan, then that would mean they believed she had the injuries very shortly after saying goodbye to James Lawrence in the taxi. That would be very bad news for McGregor's case. If people are skeptical of Emer Brennan because she deleted the photos, the injuries seem to be verifiably discussed in the audio recording with her boyfriend, and that was about 3.5 hours after leaving James Lawrence. So there is some wiggle room there. But with these timelines in mind, the jury might have distilled the whole case down to the following 2 questions. Did the injuries likely appear to be the result of an assault? Like, could they have been the result of an accident or rough sex? Or did they look more likely to be the result of an assault? If the jury felt the answer to that question was yes, then the next question would be, we don't know who did it, but in the 10 to 14 hours when they seem to occur, who was more likely to have inflicted those injuries, Conor McGregor or somebody else? That is the very low bar the jury were trying to satisfy on the balance of probabilities.
But see, I don't necessarily agree with that, though. Because Conor said that they had like that it was the sex was that was what it was. So I mean, if his claim was that he had consensual but very rough sex with her, then the answer is that it's Conor. There is no other question there. So if that's what the jury's wrestling with, that's not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is who inflicted the injuries. Yes, it's Conor. Were they a result of something that was consensual or not consensual? That is the problem at the heart of all of this. Consent or not consent. If she cannot verify the consent or lack thereof, he's saying that it was consensual. She has a whole lot of inconsistencies in her recollection of the events. To me, at the very least, that washes this case out. That's my point. It's not who inflicted it. Conor inflicted the injuries, and possibly to an extent James Lawrence. But they are the people who did that portion of it. Was it as a result of a consensual act or not? If you cannot say definitively, yes it was or no it wasn't, if you do not have proof beyond a shadow of a doubt, there is no ruling to this. At least the way that I understand the law. Reasonable doubt remains if you cannot establish the consent aspect. Because after the fact, her saying, oh, I didn't consent to that it's not valid at that point. It was what happened in the moment. Did she want to be in that situation at the time or not? He said that she did. She said that she didn't. She has a lot of holes in her recollection of how everything went. he seems to remember things pretty clearly as he's presenting them. He said, she said. That's why these cases are so hard to interpret and to make a clear ruling on.
This is not beyond a reasonable doubt. This is more like gun to your head. Was it Conor or was it someone else? And the jury felt it was more likely Conor than anyone else.
But
so that's
again, is not the issue. The reasonable doubt is the issue. And I understand what he's saying here. That was what led them to the conclusion in their mind. At least one of the questions. But again, I believe that is an apples and oranges situation. Although Conor did not do himself any favors by saying that she got the injuries in a bathtub.
How I think they might have arrived at their decision, despite the massive issues with her story. One thing I want to be clear about here is that it might sound like I'm coming down on one side or the other, like I'm advocating or trying to change your minds. In the first half of this video, you might have felt that by mentioning the taxi driver, I was kind of advocating for McGregor or suggesting he didn't get a fair trial. And in the second half, clearly people could feel that I was making a case for Nikita Hand. But I'm not actually trying to push either case. And the reason I can't do that is because I'm not in a position to evaluate the credibility of the various bits of evidence or information I've discussed in this video. I don't know what the taxi driver actually said. I don't know how reliable his story was, or why it wasn't allowed in the case. I don't know how credible Emer Brennan appeared to be. I didn't hear the boyfriend's recording or see the bruising, so I'm not making the case in either direction. All I'm trying to do in this video is suggesting that if someone, like the jury, was in a position to evaluate the credibility of these pieces of evidence, these are the conclusions they might come to.
Yeah, and I think that was very eloquently said, and that is also, in a broader sense, the exact reason why, when I cover any of these kinds of instances, be it this one with Conor, or the allegations made against Alex Pereira, or anything of this nature, I always have to provide a caveat to say, I cannot definitively know one way or another ever. There's never going to be, for me personally, definitive proof one way or another. It's impossible. There are too many elements that I do not know. I am not God. As much as I often think that might be the case, it is not true. So, I'm not God or the judge or anybody of a higher power, knowledge, or authority in any regard when it comes to this case or anything else in life. So I can only draw conclusions based on what I'm presented with and leave room for the fact that there is definitely, not probably, there is absolutely pieces of information that I don't know and will never know. There's information about this case that will never be known to the people that were involved in the case. Certain elements can only be known by one side of the argument, and certain elements can only be known by the other side of the argument. So, there is just too much unknown here. And always in these kinds of cases. So that being said, if anybody would ever accuse me of being a fence sitter when it comes to this kind of stuff, you're absolutely right, I am. Because there is not and will not ever be definitive information, at least unless, aside from what the court shows. And they certainly haven't shown anything definitive in this regard. It's not enough. It's just not enough for me to logically draw a conclusion one way or another. I can only say what I feel based on the information that's being presented, and I think that I have made my opinion on that somewhat clear.
but I am certainly not coming to these conclusions myself. You know, there's a reason that they have a long, thorough trial, and it's so a group of people can take a comprehensive look at the evidence in order to evaluate its credibility, so that they can make an informed decision. I certainly don't think I'm doing that here. I'm only speculating about how those things may have been interpreted. That's all I can do.
And that is all I can do as well. React to what is being presented to me, and in this case, you just saw what I just saw. And that's really, I guess, about it for right now. Perhaps that'll be the end of it. You know, that's certainly the end of the coverage of this civil trial that has just taken place. If and when Conor appeals the decision, there is a new trial. Perhaps we'll reapproach it at that point. For now, I would like to think that this is going to be the last word that I will have on this subject. But who knows? You know, another day, another new piece of information comes to tear holes in that assumption.